Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rage and Love, where we passionately debate, explore, and review topics about religion, science, history, and current events. We have a really special show today. Firstly, my co host, Joey, is here as always. Welcome.
What's up, everybody? What's up?
So, consciousness is one thing that we all experience, but scientists barely understand. And for centuries, humans have tried to explain the mind, the idea of the soul, the spirit, and even the existence of ghosts. But what are these concepts really? Are they rooted in something physical, something metaphysical, or maybe just the desire to make sense of the unknown? So in today's episodes, we are going to be diving into these age-old questions. We'll be using the tools of epistemology, which is the study of how we know what we know, and we are going to try to understand what all of this is. And we have two amazing guests to help us navigate these questions. Firstly, we have someone with extensive knowledge about consciousness and philosophy. He also has experience with ghost hunting and very well versed in epistemology. I am beyond excited to have him on our show today. And we have Richard Gilliver from the show Skeptic Takeout. Right? Did I say that right?
Yeah. I think. I don't know much on Skeptic Takeout these days, but yeah, I think I'm more known for Talk Heathen these days. But yeah. I started Skeptic Takeout about like a lot of people did, in the pandemic days when we were
Yeah.
all kind of locked up, having nothing to do, and it started off with. I wanted to make it just kind of long form informative videos with the links to all the science and everything. And I did a good few episodes, but it just became too much work. So I've just kind of throw the occasional interview on there now and like short form TikToks length stuff. So yeah, it's still going. It's still good. I still enjoy it, having fun. Nobody's ever been beyond excited to have me on their show before. By the way.
I am. I am. Yeah, I'm a big fan. Like, yeah, I started watching you, like you said, on Talk Heathen, AXP, a lot of the ACA shows, and the first time that you were on the after show, I was like, oh my god, it's Richard. I was like kind of a little bit starstruck and like shy to talk to you, but you're a really cool, laid back guy. So I was like, all right, I could have him on my show then maybe. Just kind of
Absolutely,
one.
yeah. And when you
Uh,
told me what the topic was I was like, "Yep, I'm there. Cannot stop me talking about this stuff. If you wanted to, I wouldn't let you because I'd just keep talking anyway."
Speaking of talking, our next guest is somebody who loves to learn and discuss, all the things, which is why we chose to have him here today, because he always has something insightful and useful to say. So we have Secular Rarity.
Oh, I like that. I like that your segue into introducing me was speaking of talking a
Oh,
lot. It's
like,
perfect.
is he ever
That's
gonna shut
perfect.
up?
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. You also could have chosen like, you know, speaking of good reasons to go take a bathroom break or something, like as no, I am happy to be here to raise the bar that Richard has lowered. Yeah.
Right, right. You got to. I mean,
No,
how could
I'm
you
always
not?
yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I like
excited to
to
be back.
I
So
like to have you because I was like, whenever you're gonna be on a show, it's like somebody's like, "Hey man, you wanna come on my show and talk about some shit?" And you're like, "Oh, you know what? Shit, let me give you some facts about poop." You're like, "Talk about."
yeah, a
I'm
lot
like,
of
no, no,
really
no, like shit, like like random stuff. Now you always have something you just want to say about like every single topic. So like,
I do always have a lot of really worthless facts. They've never they've never provided me much, you know, in life. Like you would think I would at least get like a couple of free beers out of it or something, but like most of the time people just like listen to it and then are kind of like, yeah, man, that's cool. I never really knew that about Beatles, but thanks. And then, you know, we don't talk anymore. So it's an interesting life, you know. I churn through a lot of friends.
Somebody said his name is in secular brevity for a
That's
reason.
true. That's true.
And that's a fact. Yeah, like when we met in Austin, and you told me beforehand, like, hey, remind me to tell you about chocolate. And I was like, hey, what's up with this chocolate thing? You want to talk about? You and all like a whole rant about the
It's
cacao
actually
beans, and there were like people that came and joined us and like joined the conversation, and everybody was like, oh wow, like I
just
never
really feel
knew
like
that.
people should know that white chocolate is actually chocolate. Like it's not some other substance. Like it is, you know, it comes from the exact same ingredients, you know. I just
Tell us
think
about it.
that's important, right?
That is
No.
interesting. That is interesting. I didn't
It
know
is.
that. No.
Yeah, like it is. And in the United States, it has to do with a legal classification. And so white chocolate is technically considered candy, but not chocolate.
Not
So it's in the
chocolate.
same
Interesting.
category as like, you know, mints and other things. But technically it is. It's real chocolate. It's the same shit. Like you can cry about it and be upset all day, but like it's true. Like you take the same stuff and you can make either of these. Chocolate naturally comes in a handful of different colors. And I know that's weird, like pink chocolate. Like this actually became a thing like a few years ago, and it like started going around like Twitter and stuff, and people were showing all these pictures of these really cool pink chocolate things, and everybody was like, oh, they just dyed white chocolate. And it's like, no, they didn't. It is a natural process of making chocolate that it can turn that color. And like again, you can be upset about it all you want, but
It might
it's
be
true.
from the strawberry cows.
That's right. That is actually no. Let's not. No, I don't want to think about
Go
that
down
again.
that rabbit hole.
That was horrifying. That was
You're
horrifying.
gonna leave the stream if we keep talking about that. So
Yeah.
yeah. I'm sorry I traumatized you with that one.
Yeah.
So there is a question. I'm gonna lead into the topic of today. Okay,
Mhm.
we have a couple guests already. So there's a question that I always ask people in order to get to know them better, and it helps me like understand the person a little bit better. I think I've asked you before, Sakuravati. So if you've already answered, I mean, you can answer it again or not. But Richard, I would like for you to answer the question. Like, my question is, how do you think? Like, not what do you think? How do you think in your head? What is it a verbal thinking? Is it visual thinking? Is it more like abstract, emotional? What kind of thinking do you have in your head?
I think I have a mixture. I think when I'm assessing things, consciously assessing things, I always do it verbally. I have conversations with myself when there's something that I'm not sure about, or something I want to kind of introspect on, or whether it's something I'm trying to kind of get to the bare bones of. I always have a conversation like as if I was talking with the caller, and putting different points of view forward and trying to look at those points of view and kind of take them apart, and how would you respond to that, and how would respond to that. That's kind of how I do it when I'm assessing things. It's very much a conversational, like voices, multiple points of view, multiple kind of different takes, and kind of looking at each one and trying to pull them apart.
That's interesting. Like, do you feel like all the voices are the same voice, but just kind of giving you a different perspective?
Yeah, it's not like it's like, I don't know, multiple personality disorder.
Yeah, no, like, okay, gotcha.
But no, it's I just kind of like put these different ideas, different perspectives onto different internal characters, and have them kind of discuss it and kind of explore it that way.
Do you see pictures? Do you see like pictures in your head or words?
No, not really.
Yeah. Okay.
No, not unless I mean, if in kind of, if I'm thinking about something abstract, I might do.
Sure.
Or as like kind of a specific thought experiment. I did one when I was younger. I was probably in my early teens, and I was thinking about time, and I was wrong. And I was quite wrong, but and I thought I was brilliant at the time, but I'd kind of come up with this thought experiment and kind of, to kind of figure out what time is and how we look at time and experience time and things like that. And I'd come up with this idea and it actually came from watching an old episode of The Twilight Zone, and time had frozen, and it kind of prompted me to start thinking about this idea that, well, what exactly is time? Because it seems that time is directly related to, our experience. So our experience plus kind of events equals time and how we experience that. But obviously as I got older and learned about kind of space-time relativity, that all got blew up. My brilliant teenage self got blown out of the water by actual science, which is great. And then the way it should be to be able to create yourself. But no, that was one of the earliest kind of times I can think of. And I think I was about 12 or 13, 14, something in that region. And that I can really remember kind of sitting down and stopping and really kind of going into myself and saying, right, let's try and figure this thing out. Let's have a look at this thing and try and figure this big life question out. What is time and how do we experience it? And I think that's the first time I did that. And so, yeah, thought experiments and things I can kind of look at abstractly, and they're not as conversational, but usually it's conversation for me.
Yeah, I'm constantly talking to myself. Like I'm always
not a surprise, Elliot.
Yeah. yeah. Like I'm always, hearing other viewpoints on things or whatever. But I have crazy vivid pictures in my head. I mean, like this morning I woke up from a really, really weird dream. And genuinely the only thing I remember about it was in the dream, I woke up and looked up to see somebody standing next to me. And they were like, "Hey, are you feeling any better? Obviously you liked the carrots." And I went, "What?" And looked down next to my bed, and there were like a handful of visibly like half-eaten carrots. And then the person was like, "Yeah, I brought you some snacks so you could feel better." And then I woke up, and I just remember waking up and just being like, "What the fuck? Why was I dreaming about carrots? Like, why?" But
where are they now?
Yeah, I checked to make sure that I had not, like, in the middle of the night, just eaten a handful of carrots and thrown them onto the side of my bed. But like, yeah, very visibly this morning, I woke up with a picture in my head of these carrots next to my bed, and was like, why would I do that? Why would somebody bring me that? Like, I don't know. Like, if I was sick in my dream, why would somebody bring me carrots? I just, anyway. But yeah, I did not. I don't even have carrots in my house right now. That is just also maybe I need to go buy some. Like, maybe that's what
that was the sign. Probably the sign.
Yeah, go get some carrots. I was gonna ask if you had some ranch dressing. I mean, AJ would definitely.
You know what? That is funny. I know for a fact that is on my shopping list. Is to get some ranch dressing.
We lost Richard. I'm sure he'll be back. He's got the link, so we'll just continue the conversation. There we go.
There he is.
There we go.
I don't know what happened. Sorry, people.
He got scared of the ranch dressing talk.
That was it.
Okay, so we're moving on to like more visual thinking now. Joe, so I know we've discussed this one, but just share yours just for like the public and our friends here. How do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a more visual person too, but I do have a voice in my head that's constantly talking to me as well, as Richard said. I mean, and secular rarity. I mean, there's a voice where if I'm trying to think of a solution to a question or even just doing something, it's constantly, but that voice it's basically me, but I see it as a different. It's like a detachment from me, I feel like. So I can like argue back and forth with it, or I can debate with it, or I can ask it questions. As I told you before, like I can ask it to like go back through my memories, and it can go through, pull different things that I've been through and show me images and so forth. So I guess image and a voice, basically.
Sort of a mix. That's cool.
Yeah.
To me, it was really interesting when I first heard that question, because you assume everybody thinks the same way. And when I asked our teenager, he said that he thinks in text. I was like, that is very different. I've never heard that one before. He like says that he thinks mostly like sort of like a typed up version of words rather
He said
than
like
a
open
voice, or
captions,
rather
right?
than
He said like captions.
yeah, that's interesting. And for me, it's actually changed, which is something that I haven't heard anybody say before. And I think I know why. When I was a kid, obviously I didn't have my cochlear implant, so my hearing was severely affected. I had like 15% on one of the ears and 8% on the other. So that means that I will hear 15% or 8% of a conversation, within any given moment. And so for me, the sound of the word wasn't really important. It wasn't something that competed very much. Like I was never able to hear birds or cats or animals, or like hardly heard like dogs barking unless it was like really close to me, or if somebody was talking to me, like a lot of the voices sounded muffled. And then once I got my my cochlear implant, I feel like over the years my thinking has changed. So it used to be extremely visual, like mostly visual. Like I could visualize things in very bright colors, and if I read something, like if I was reading a book, I could like imagine the whole scenario that was going on, and I would like, if I was in a situation and I had to come up with, I don't know, answers or something, like it was, my thoughts will come in images. But I feel like over time, as I focus more on having to relearn how to speak, how to pronounce things, and how to hear, like the first time that I came home with the hearing, with the implant, I kept hearing this sound and I didn't know what it was. And then Joe got home and I was like, "What the fuck is that sound?" And it was like, "Oh, it's the cat." Like the cat
The cat
paws on
paws
the
on the
wooden
wood floor.
floor.
It's
And
like
like I'd never heard that before. So it was like,
yeah. There's a lot of really
literally,
annoying sounds.
yeah, man. Sometimes I'm just like, oh man, I'm so lucky I can just pull it off, and it's like dead silence. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but anyways, as over the years, I've had it for about what was that, like 2017 maybe, or so, or 18, somewhere around that time. But over the years, my thinking has shifted, and I can hardly ever think in images anymore. If I'm thinking of something, somebody describes something to me, I'm like, uh, like I have a hard time picturing it. And like it's mostly like this non-stop chatter of my own voice now. So it's like, shut up already, AJ. Yeah, so I thought it was pretty interesting. Like, I wonder how that is affected. If somebody who becomes blind. Well, I have lost my vision as well, so maybe that also could have had something to do with the dimming of my ability to visualize things. I don't know. Could be like
Yeah, I
things
think
down, decreasing vision.
yeah, and I think all of this that we're talking about is kind of one of the reasons that I get a little frustrated sometimes when we talk about some of the things in philosophy or neuroscience and whatnot. Like I'm neither. I just want to make that clear, right? I'm no freaking expert, you guys. There are a lot of people who are really, really studied in this stuff. And what I try to do is go look at what they're saying and go look at the information that they've provided to get to that conclusion and go, oh, okay, that seems to be sound to me. Okay, that makes sense, and try to go where they go. They're the ones that are experts, right? That's what we have to rely on. And when I see these individuals in that space that are making these really broad sweeping pronouncements about how the human brain works and stuff, it always kind of just gets under my skin a little, because it's like, man, I feel like I feel like a dipshit like me could even look at the literature and say that you can't make comments like that. Just right here, we've shown, 4 different, ways of just navigating the world in and of itself. So, and, the ability of the brain to overcome and adapt and change in these really radical ways. So just to so flippantly be like, oh, this is how consciousness is, and everybody, or this is what everybody's actually thinking about when they say these words. It's like, I don't know, man. I don't know that that's so true.
Yeah, there's one more way of thinking that I heard about. I'm sure you guys are familiar with aphantasia. The term aphantasia is like where people don't have either a voice or text or abstract thinking. It's just kind of more like the way I've seen it described is instinctual or emotional thinking, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
And
very interesting.
Yeah,
I couldn't even understand that. Yeah, I guess we can't conceive it because none of us, can see it from that viewpoint. Like you just said, everybody has their own different view of what they see.
Like your own heads never shut up before, so it's like,
and
I've never heard quietness.
We're trying it through that kind of thing that we're doing where we're internalized. We're trying to think about what it's like for them, but that doesn't, we're already starting on such a bad level, right? It's like, if we want to actually understand what aphantasia is like, us like thinking about it in that same it wouldn't work, right?
Yeah, the voice in my head's like, okay, hold on, I'll be quiet for a minute, but
it's like imagine you never existed, and you can do that in a sense, but really what you're doing is you're imagining the world with you out of it. And so ultimately you're still imagining your existence having an effect on the world, because you can't, you have to exist for you to be thinking about it like that. So you can't really, it's a fun little, the brain's weird.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting though, because I think that might be why some people have such a hard time giving up the belief in eternal life, because they can't imagine not existing, because they've always existed in their mind, right? Like you can't imagine what you were before you were born. So it's like, okay, there was nothing there, but what, like I've got to have been somewhere. And you always go back to the beginning of your own thinking. And it's like, yeah, how can I fathom, how can I imagine not existing anymore? So you're like wanting or wishing or hoping that your existence will continue on and on forever. We've gone on and on forever now, Richard. What do you think?
I lots of interesting points. Is that this is always a fascinating kind of field of conversations to have, and you inevitably go down lots of different rabbit holes in it. Already, I've been thinking about the kind of something I want to talk about later on, which is the umwelt. The kind of, which is a biological term, and it kind of means that like each species has its own kind of perceptual bubble in which it lives. There's that famous Nagel philosophical paper about what it's like to be a bat, and that's kind of used a lot in the hard problem of consciousness. I don't think it is. I don't think it is such a hard problem personally, but we might get onto that later. But I think this idea that each species, I think, has its own perceptual bubble is very, very important. And I think consciousness studies, and I so wish people would do this, especially in philosophy, is look at fields outside of their own. Because when you look at philosophical consciousness studies, you get this thing. In fact, there was I think it was just before the pandemic, it was cancelled because of the pandemic. There was going to be, it was set up by the, what do they call them? The people who did the prayer studies. I can't remember what they call them. You might remember, Secular. Templeton Foundation. Yeah, they were kind of, it was set up by them, and it was brilliant. And it was this idea to get everybody who was into consciousness studies. It was going to be chaired by Daniel Kahneman, who wrote Thinking Fast and Slow. And the idea of it was to get everybody who's got these different theories of consciousness all together, basically to sit across the table from each other and slap it out.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
but like with all the leading experts in the fields who were studying consciousness, all the neurologists, all the psychologists, all the philosophers, get them to sit down at a table together and kind of doing this thing. I think it was called accelerated research on consciousness. This thing that we're supposed to be doing, and it was going to be a long-term thing chaired by Daniel Kahneman, and to like really get into ideas, because the idea was that everybody's got their own little kind of field of study in this, but nobody's kind of done anything where everybody sat down together and said, like, let's iron it out, let's try and iron it out. The big flaw in that, and the big flaw in consciousness study overall, is that you will never, ever, ever see working biologists invited to these things. And when you get specialists who talk about, who look at the unwelt of different animals, who look at bats, who look at spiders, who look at elephants, who look at seals, who look at whales, and all these different creatures that all have their different consciousness and the different way they represent consciousness. And an octopus has a brain in each arm.
Yeah.
And biologists
independently
don't know whether they kind of all connected this as a central brain, whether they're totally separate or totally independent, whether it's working as a system. We don't know.
Yeah.
And yet none of these people are invited to consciousness studies. None of these experts who look at non-human animals. And that is a huge shortfall for me. That is a huge shortfall in consciousness studies overall. Why aren't non-human animal experts invited to these things? It's like we're trying to isolate human beings and say, right, we are, if we solve human consciousness, we have solved all consciousness. And it's so arrogant, and it's everybody in the field. It's literally everybody in consciousness studies who kind of sits here and neglects this. And I think it's a shame, and I think it's criminal to call yourself somebody who's I'm interested in consciousness studies, and it's criminal to call yourself somebody who's interested in consciousness studies and neglect this. It's literally just bypassing the vast majority of conscious creatures to, when studying consciousness. That's bizarre. It's a really weird thing to do.
I think that is a massively good point. And I was thinking back, it was years and years ago. I mean, had to have been like 10, 15-ish. I don't know, maybe a little more, but I mean, it was a news article in my lifetime, so that I remember reading this, where, it was kind of like, horses might be conscious, guys. Like, we thought they were big, dumb brick walls, but turns out like they are on the same intelligence level as dogs, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. And we've continued to discover these fascinating understandings of existence, right? That is all around us, that absolutely shakes up what we think time and time again. I mean, literally just the other day, I was hanging out with a real close friend of mine, and I said, "Hey man, did you hear this thing? Apparently, we just mapped every single neural pathway of the brain of a fly. Like, first time ever. We've got a 3D model. It is 100% complete, you guys. And it's not like a guess. It's not like man, we think this one goes over to that. No, like, we literally mapped it.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane. That's so cool." And my buddy goes, "Hey man, I don't want to sound like I'm being a dick. I'm not shitting on it or anything. I just genuinely curious. What does that do for us? Like, why is that important? And I was like, no, that's a great question. No, that's a really good question. Yeah, man, what the fuck does that do for us? Why care about the brain of a fly?" And the answer, I think, is because the more that we come to understand these types of biological structures in non-human animals, the more that we will come to understand ours. And so that's why I totally fucking agree. You know, zoologists, primatologists, biologists, all of these people need to be right at the front lines of these conversations with consciousness. And look, there's probably going to be somebody out there. I know we've all heard it here, and they're like, well, you can't prove that consciousness comes from the brain. You know, there's the hard problem. And maybe signals are coming from whatever, all that garbage, right? Hey, fine, like maybe let's look into that. It's cool, man. You want to say that there's spirits and divinity, whatever. Fine, man. You can come to the conference. But here's the one thing we know for sure is that there is definitely a connection between it. What exactly that connection is, how deep and integral that is, we can talk. We can talk. Fine.
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about, I think it's starfish, if I remember correctly. They don't have a brain, okay, but they have some sort of neuroanatomical structures within their body. And scientists have determined that they have consciousness, even though they don't have a brain. So, I mean, is the brain required for consciousness? Maybe not, maybe yes. We're still trying to find out. But I will say with pretty good certainty that it has to do with the neural pathways, that even if it isn't in
For
the
sure.
brain itself, like it has to do with all the neurology and neurotransmitters and all of that.
Absolutely. And there's more work being done on the spinal cord and the brainstem, and how those are potentially more integral into the foundational understanding of consciousness, you know? And again, look, I get it. What I'm about to say is really broad. I'm skipping over a lot of important things here, but like, if you think about it for a second, and you think about a single-celled organism, right? And you think about it trying to navigate itself in the world. Disregard the concept of predator, prey, anything like that. Just think about the fact that, like, you know, at any point, this single-celled organism in some puddle could move to the other side of the puddle that's just slightly more acidic, and it'll die, right? So the moment at which that single-celled organism has the ability to recognize the boundary of itself versus the world around it, the chances of survival for that thing just skyrocket. I mean, right? It's so clear that is on the table here for life itself. It's like, if you as a person don't have the ability to like feel any pain whatsoever, or get light senses, sound, touch, smell, taste, you don't have any of these whatsoever, but you're kind of just like a wind-up doll, and you just get up and just start moving, like you're gonna walk off a cliff. You know, you're not gonna survive very long to pass on genes. And so the more that you have that ability to kind of recognize yourself, and we don't think about it, but we've got all of these other senses that are playing a part on a regular basis. Man, you know, if you're slightly stuffed up, you can feel it in your body. If you're turned just a little bit, sitting on a kind of an angle, you feel it. You know this stuff, you know. All of that is deeply, deeply important for consciousness. And again, we can have the discussion about where it all comes from and all that stuff, but it very much is obviously connected in a biological sense. So those people need to be a part of the conversation.
Yeah, so that what you were just talking about reminded me a couple of weeks ago. I did a show for the nonprofits with Infidel, and we were discussing jellyfish. Okay, and there's this calm jellyfish that when one of them gets injured, another jellyfish can come and combine itself with the one that's injured, and they become one. Like their gastrointestinal system, their neurological systems, they all become one. except for their
That's cool.
buttholes. Their buttholes do not merge, okay? I'm just trying to put that out there. That's what it was the scientists discovered.
Is that real? Are you serious on that?
I'm totally serious. You can
Yeah.
go and watch it. We did a whole article on it.
It's
It was
really
a whole
very
episode.
interesting. Yeah.
That's wild. That's really cool. I wish people did stuff like that.
I'm gonna, yeah.
Like, oh no, your leg! I got you, bro.
And they're not just any buttholes, okay? They're called transient anuses, and they disappear as soon as they poop. Like they finish pooping, and their butthole just disappears.
Transient anuses
Yes,
could
sir.
be the name of a metal band. I mean, that is a great name. That should be used as much as possible. If you do absolutely nothing, okay, after the end of this video, all I want for you is to remember that phrase, transient anuses. That's amazing.
Glenn said the exact same thing. He was like, that would be an epic band name.
It's serious. Like, oh my God, that's great. Wow,
But,
I never thought about that.
But anyway, so all of this to say that scientists studying this, they realize that this helps with helping us understand human allo recognition, which we found out that this is the only species so far that has allo recognition, which is like where they recognize that they are basically not themselves. Like so, like if you implant something like I have corneal transplants, okay? So if I have a transplant from somebody else, my body is going to recognize that that does not belong to myself, and I have to take steroids and all of that in order to prevent the rejection. And these comb jellyfish don't have that, so they can merge with another one without
No
doing
rejection.
any damage, without any rejection. So that has helped advance the studies for organ rejection. So it's like, yeah, like biology, like we're thinking, oh, it's just a jelly, like what's the big deal about that? But we're talking about like incredible medical advancements that we can do based on that. And like you're saying, as far as consciousness, yeah, we can totally use what we're learning about like all these single cell organisms, or like starfish and whatever other non-human animals, what their biology looks like, and figure out things for our biology and our consciousness and things that we don't quite understand yet.
Yeah, I think we have a bias that humans are like the most advanced, but there's so many other living creatures that have like so many crazy abilities and things that humans can't even do, and we just overlook that.
I always point out the mantis shrimp, that humans have 3 color receptive cones in the eyes, and they have like 16. They can see, ultraviolet colors with their bare eyes. It's like, they humanitis.
And there's some, oh God, I'm gonna get these numbers wrong, but they are this crazy. There's some like 3,000-year-old fungus that is like the size of the United States or something, like it is all the exact same. It's not like the same species. It's not like multiple it is literally a single connected organism that is this expansive and has lived for this long. And yeah, I mean, to understand that, to understand how the connection between the most distant parts of this single thing communicate, would be a huge advancement. When we started looking deeper into the rainforest and started to understand more about the symbiosis that goes on there between the different plants, holy crap, man. You come to find out, like, there is some weird, wild communication that happens between some of these different species of plants, where they will literally start making chemicals. Another plant will start making chemicals because the first plant put off some chemicals that was like, oh no, there's like fungus on me that's killing me. And then another plant gets that signal and then is like, oh yeah, that's where I'm going to grow and produce
I've
these
heard about
chemicals to
that.
like save this tree from dying from this
Yeah.
fungus. Like, it's insane. That's insanity. We need to understand that more, and then we'll this hard problem won't be so hard anymore. I think. I mean, I'm
Agreed.
with you there, Richard. But
Yeah, I think
Amarilla
that,
fungus, huh?
I
Okay,
think the
there
thing
you
is as well
just the
is
name.
that I think there's a distinct divide with the hard problem thing. If you
Mm.
have a look at kind of the neurologist side of people who are discovering, exploring this stuff, the guys who work on the brain, like physically go into people's heads and work on the brain and do the experiments. I think there's far less of those that kind of go down this hard problem route. I don't think there's any doubt in, and certainly all the neurologists or neuroscientists I've spoken to, and I've spoken to a fair few over the years, I don't think I've met one who doesn't think that the kind of consciousness comes from the brain, or doesn't come from the brain or the nervous system. I think they're kind of universally, I shouldn't say that universally, but certainly the majority of them agree that that's the case. I think it's when you get into philosophy and the people like to sit in their armchairs, and I'm talking about professional philosophers here, not just the internet people, but the kind of the people who like to sit in their armchairs and and think about this stuff. 70% of those think that there's a hard problem of consciousness, and they're not the guys who are working on the brain. Consult the people who are actually working on the brain perhaps a little bit more, and let's have a fuller conversation. And I take my hat off to the Templeton Foundation for trying to get this thing together. COVID came along and spoiled it all. I hope something similar gets up again in the future, despite my criticism of not having biologists there. I think it was a really good idea, and I was really excited to see what the results of it were.
I was hoping you were gonna say that it came back after COVID, but
no,
yeah.
not to my knowledge. It may have done, but not to my knowledge. And certainly, I don't think in the form that it was going to take. You've got to take your hat off to the Templeton Foundation as a predominantly Christian organization. They are the kind of people who want to find out this stuff and aren't going to hide the results, even if it's not in their favor. Hats off to them. We're not talking William Lane Craig and Frank Turek here. Well, you know what I mean? We're talking about genuine people who want to find genuine answers. And I can only applaud that, no matter which side of the fence, if you like, it comes from.
And I don't want to shut out the religious people from this conversation for a couple of different reasons. I mean,
Absolutely.
one, I think that's something we on the non-religious side are constantly having to say to people, like, hey, don't shut us out of this conversation, man. We can talk about what it means to love. We can talk about beauty. Like, don't kick us out just because we don't have this God belief. But also because I think there is something very human that comes through in religion, right? There is something that is very much tied to the way that our consciousness is structured, the way that it presents itself, how we understand our sense of self. And I think exploring that more and understanding that more is important for this discussion. Again, it's just that I don't come to the conclusions that there is actually this spirit thing there, but it's fascinating to me why so many people seem to have this thought, like, where is that? Why is that? Let's explore that more. Again, I still don't think there's a magic man controlling me, but whatever.
I agree, and I think it's important to include. I mean, I talk to religious people all the time, not just on the shows, but kind of academically as well. So I'm kind of used to talking to them on a level of equality, and that's one of the greatest things in this big wide atheist online community we have that really frustrates me is that there's so many people out there who want to shut religious people down just because they're religious. And I get it. If you've come from religion, I never did. If you've come from religion, and especially if you've had trauma, I get why you might kind of not want to kind of give those voices the merits they might deserve in some cases. I want to quickly, if you don't mind, address, because this question was asked very, very early on, and I think I might have an answer. It was by Deanne Kearns, who, it wasn't a question, it was a statement, who put very near the start of the show, and I've been eyeing it up ever since I first saw it. And they said, I'd be interested to see a study that follows kids from 5 to 6 year old through late teens.
Okay. Oh, you found it.
Yeah. So examine the progression of consciousness in both religious and non-religious families. I might be able to get something very, very similar. If you just wait right there, I'm just going to pop these off for 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I was actually going to bring this topic up.
This is the, it's a British Journal of Religious Education. It's a kind of boring thing I read. And in one of these, I don't know which one it is, but in one of these, there is actually a paper being produced called Christian Ethos Secondary Schools, Parental Church Attendance and Student Attitude Towards Christianity, Exploring Connections in England and Wales by Leslie J. Francis and Andrew Village. And it touches very much on that very kind of comment. And it's looking at the religiosity of students as they attend school and as they go through their school life, and whether, how religious they remain, whether they go to religious schools, whether it's a kind of a secular school, whether the parents are still heavily involved in the religion while they're at school, whether the parents kind of back away from the religion. And that's what that study is all about. And I saw that comment and I thought, I know something that you might be really, really interested in here. So I will pass that information on. It's Dee, so she's a caller. A caller to Talk Heathen regularly. So I will pass that study on to Dee because it might be really, really useful for them to, in relation to that. It is in England and Wales, unfortunately, not the US, but it touches on the same kind of things. But anyway, just an aside.
You guys are basically countries over there. So you're close enough. No, I think that is definitely something that affects this, right? This is why you and I talk about this so much, and you and I have a really similar focus when it comes to epistemology and skepticism and stuff. We're very interested in how people are thinking. We're very interested in why people are getting to conclusions. And I think there is some good indication out there, not the exact studies that Dee was talking about. And I'd love to see more studies like that. But there is some good indication out there that being religious or not does definitely affect how you approach new information. Definitely changes the way that you orient yourself in the world. And a lot of times, in my opinion, and this is why I'm on the side that I'm on, right? A lot of times I think that is very harmful. I think it's demonstrably worse outcomes, at worst, and at best, they're the exact same outcomes, but just like more effort and more pain. So it's like, I don't know, man. I don't see a good reason to keep using that mindset.
Yeah, okay, so I'm not advocating for poking and prodding children. Just warning, just putting that out there right now. But I think that the topic of studying the brain of like how children think. We know that before age 5, the brain of children is the part of the brain that consolidates memories isn't fully developed. It's sort of from birth to 5, it's just in constant change. And so, but that's why most people only remember things from around that age. It's like 4, 5, 6. That's when you have like your very first memory. There are some who have them before. That's normal. That's fine. But I would say the average. So anyways, like does I was thinking about this earlier. Like does that mean that babies are born without consciousness, because consciousness is sort of like your own awareness of your surrounding, your awareness of that you are yourself. Like if you look in the mirror and you're like, oh, that's me. Like if you put a baby in front of a mirror, they will probably not like when they realize, like, I think that it will be like a great thing to sort of further study in order to be able to understand like when and how exactly
There is
consciousness
the
develops. Like, are we born with consciousness? So.
there is the dot on the forehead test that we've done with non-human animals as well. There is some criticism of that test too, and I think that's worthwhile as well to discuss.
I'm not familiar with it. So.
Yeah, what is that? I'm curious too.
Yeah, this is super cool. And so basically, what the researchers do is they will, put this creature, whatever it is, in front of a mirror so that they can see a very clear reflection of themselves, right? And then one of the first things that they look for is just to see whether or not the animal, recognizes that this thing is itself or another thing, right? And one way they can do that is by putting a very clear dot on their forehead and then seeing if the animal, when seeing themselves in the mirror, reaches for the dot on the other animal's forehead that they're seeing or their own forehead. And so, and we can, there is a period of time when you do this with a human, with a baby, where the baby will not reach for its own forehead. And then there is a period of time where it will start doing this, and because basically the whole point is that you put the dot on the forehead in a way that like they don't notice, so it's supposed to be like us walking up to a mirror and looking in the mirror and going, oh shit, what's that on my face? Like, oh god,
something on my,
I had sauce on my face, my bad, and so like that is something that not, there's a bunch of living creatures that never ever do that, right? They never ever recognize that it's on them that they're looking at. But there's a bunch of creatures that do, that are not human. And so that is a really cool test. Same with like an object permanence test. So you can take some creatures and basically put a large enough object over them, whether it's a blanket or like a cardboard box or something that is, opaque so that they can't see through it. And basically when you put this on them, within seconds, they will just essentially accept that that's the world. Like they just accept like, okay, the rest of the world is gone. And they won't try to take it off. They won't try to get out, even though they absolutely can. It's totally possible. They just won't do it. And then there are other animals that you do the exact same thing, they will instantly, and it's a species thing. Like it's by different species of animals, It's not like this particular wiener schnitzel, whatever. That's not right, but wiener dog, whatever. I'm hungry.
But to me, that brings up the question of whether, like, are there different levels of consciousness, or can we just say, consciousness is just consciousness? Or like,
I think that's one of those unanswered questions, isn't it, that people have been struggling with for a long time. And, I'd love to be able to answer that, and I can't. I don't know.
I thought you might.
I think, this thing about reality and consciousness, because I tend to talk about them as a similar thing. Not as a similar thing, but in the same kind of process of conversation. Because out there, this is the way I describe it, and there are lots of different philosophical ways. Well, this is mine, people, so I'm going to lay it on the line. And I think for me, this is the best way I can think of to kind of look at what is reality and what is truth in regarding that reality. And in consciousness plays a vital role in that. And so we have this reality, which is the sum of all things. I think it's fair to say that reality is the sum of all things, and most of it is out there for us. It's all these blips and atoms and all these invisible worlds that we can't see, these spectrums we have no access to without inventing instruments and stuff. And then we have, we have our little corner, our puddle of reality, our umwelt of reality as a human species. And within that, there's this great big question of, what does everybody think the same? Does everybody see the same? And not everybody does, but I think in general we can kind of, when someone is outside of the norm, we can cross-reference and say, this is one of those things that really annoys me when theists say, well, you'll never be able to describe blue to a blind man. Well, I think you pretty fucking accurately can. If a blind man can hear, then he's aware of ranges of spectrums. He's not stupid because he's blind. You can explain the color spectrum to him, and you can explain it in a way that relates to the sound spectrum to him. And he's got full access to the sound spectrum. So I think you can do a reasonable job of describing color to a blind person, a fully blind person. And it really annoys me when theists say that. That is one of their gotcha things. Well, describe fucking colour to a blind man. And smart ass, I will. Sit down, sit back, and fucking listen, because I'm about to do that for you now. Yeah. And can we swear on your channel? So I never even bothered to. So that's kind of, we have our human umwelt, if we want to use this Kellian term. Of it, and I think it's a good measure. And the what truth is when we take that umwelt, our experience of this reality that is out there, and we take terms and explore things, and they correspond to that reality. And that's what truth is. It's stuff that corresponds to that reality. And you can kind of, a horse is real. It is a true thing. A unicorn is not, because it doesn't correspond to that reality. And, we can explore lots of things, complex, simple, in that very, very simple framework. And whenever it comes to, when we were talking about consciousness, and Elliot was saying earlier about people having this idea that it comes from out there, these dualists who think it comes from outside the physical and outside the brain. In every case, we have something like that, or God, or ghosts, or demons, or whatever it is, whether it's devas from the Buddhist traditions, whether it's angels from the Christian tradition, anything that's outside that does not correspond to that reality, to that shared reality we have as a species. And I think that's a really, really good starting point. That when we're having these conversations, when we're talking about how we're assessing things, how consciousness works, how we're assessing truth claims, we can look at that bubble of human experience and say, does that thing correspond to this reality? Mm-hmm. And if it doesn't, then let's explore that claim and explore why that doesn't. And I think we can do it with all manner of supernatural things. My personal, obviously, I do it with God, because that's my thing. But in experience-wise, I've done it with ghosts a lot in the past, because I was heavily involved in kind of going out in ghost hunting teams and being the resident skeptic on those. So it's like, I think it's really, really interesting that we've got this method we can look at and say, let's use this as a starting point. And this is what we were saying earlier about including religious people in, and people who have these supernatural beliefs. We don't have to dismiss them, because we're all starting from the same place. We all accept that we eat food to live, we're driving cars to work, or to go around racetracks really fast, or whatever we want to drive a car for. We have all these shared human experiences that we all agree on without doubting it whatsoever. Nobody sits there. You'll never ever get in a conversation with somebody who sits there and says, well, it's okay saying we've got a shared reality, but I don't drink. I would never drink a liquid in my life. Yeah, right. Because you're fucking lying, sir. Of course you have. Right. So you can start from the very, very basic stuff like that. and build up. And then you get to the shit we don't share, the stuff that we can't correspond to reality. And then that's where it gets really interesting and say, well, why do you believe this? Why is it that you believe in ghosts or gods or devas or jinn or any of these other supernatural kind of things? That's where the conversation gets interesting.
Yeah, I think it's, the reason I thought of the levels of consciousness before we get into the ghost situation was because I was having a conversation yesterday about, drugs and the effect that it has on the brain. And I got to thinking, okay, like if you have somebody, like when somebody loses consciousness, what do we mean by that, right? We mean that they lose their ability to recognize like their surrounding and to have memories of their situations and all of that. And so that's why I was thinking, okay, so maybe there are sort of different levels to where consciousness becomes diminished. But I will say is you still do have a level of consciousness. I don't know if you think of somebody who has like Alzheimer's or dementia. And when I think about the concept of having a soul, I think about, well, what about these people, right? Like somebody with Alzheimer's who slowly loses their ability to think and to perform activities that they used to. They lose certain skills. They lose the memory of their loved ones. Like, what is it God doing in that situation? What does that say about their soul? That was one of the things that got me out of my sort of belief in ghosts. When Joe and I first got married, I was an atheist, so I didn't really have like a belief in a God or anything. I guess I hadn't really thought of much about that stuff. And he was really into watching like the ghost hunters shows here in the US and all of that. So it was something that we will do together. We will watch these shows, and I was kind of started thinking, oh, that's really cool. Like, and I would say that I definitely believed in ghosts for many years. I even had, I think I've shared this one with you guys before, where I had a situation where somebody close to us passed away, and I heard as I was walking into this person's house after the funeral, I heard their voice. But I'm deaf. I didn't have my cochlear implant at that time, and I obviously didn't think about that. Like I didn't think of the entire implications of my own claim. And that's what you're talking about, Richard. Like talking about putting it all out there and thinking closely about each individual part of what you're saying. Like if I say, oh, I heard the ghost of so and so speak to me, right? Like, okay, what exactly does that mean? To me, that meant that one, that the afterlife had to exist, and this person's soul had to be in the afterlife. And it had to be the afterlife that I believed in, or was it the one that they believed in? But then how did they mesh together, right? Like if it was different ones, it meant that this person's soul had to have some sort of effect on or physical natural world, right? So if they're supernatural, what are they doing manipulating the natural world? And especially that one of somebody who has a very low level of hearing, like if I heard it, and it's like, okay, so
that's
like the more you think about it, it's like, okay, like, yeah,
but we do
trauma,
that
grief,
as
it makes more
people.
sense.
We do that, and it's like when you think about it now after the fact, right? You go, I heard the voice of my dead loved one while I was deaf. And it's like, okay, no, I see it now.
Yeah.
But every moment of our existence, right? And the more that we come to understand about consciousness, this seems to be the case more and more. Every moment of our existence, we are receiving a massive amount of information in a lot of different ways, right? And there is oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, there is a really big correlation between that information outside and that information inside, right? Sometimes those wires get crossed. I mean, we've all had that moment where we're looking for something over and freaking over again. And next thing you know, you turn around and it's literally sitting right there, obviously in front of you. And you're just like, I swear to God, I looked at this cabinet like 5 times. And it's like, yeah, you did. And your brain, receiving all of this massive amount of information, got its wires crossed somewhere and it didn't. And the same thing happens from internally, right? There is
Right.
this correlation of when you see something red, there is this physical representation that is being interpreted by all of these sensory organs inside of you. But sometimes, man, sometimes that red signal comes off as blue or purple or gray, or you just don't get anything. And it's incredibly interesting. And with this idea of like levels of consciousness, this is something that we can all experience in our lives. We can all do this in a lot of interesting different ways. Meditation is a big one. I think that you can, as you get further and further into those types of practices, you hit some really interesting and cool moments, in my opinion, that make you kind of reassess some of that, how you're navigating through the world. But like, man, y'all can do this by just not sleeping. You can just go 2 days without getting adequate sleep and feel the difference in your conscious state. You can drink a little alcohol or use substances and you can see this adjustment. And so it's like, yeah, there does seem to be something to this idea that there is like maybe a baser level of kind of this awareness and sensory perception, and then this higher level where it's this, okay, let's kind of assess that even further, and again, I'm not breaking any new ground here. There's a lot of people that have talked about this for a really long time, and a lot of really cool philosophical work was done on this before we had any of that neurological evidence to back it up. But it is only with that neurological evidence that I think we have really started to make that progress and determine this stuff,
Yeah,
So
and that's
when
how
oh, go ahead.
oh, so no, I was
Well,
gonna
I just
say
had a
that.
question. Go ahead though.
Oh
I'll
yeah.
let you say first.
Okay. No, that what you were just saying, Elliot, that too much, like we have such a huge amount of information constantly going
Mhm.
into our brains, and what happens is our brains just block what's not important out.
Mhm.
And so I learned recently that pretty much everybody hallucinates at some point in their lives, and
Yeah.
sometimes quite a bit. And it's not uncommon, and it's not like a mental illness, and it's not like anything severe. It's just something like, I don't know, like where your brain, like I said, it's filtering out unimportant information, so it's filling in the gaps, kind of like the god of the gaps, but by your own brain. And like I don't know, like you hear a sound and your brain automatically assumes that it is a knock at the door, or like the phone ringing, or whatever, or you see a shadow and it somewhat resembles something you've seen in a movie, and it automatically thinks it's like a murderer out to get you. And you literally hallucinate like this being exactly that shape, and you go and tell your friends, and like, this person was trying to kill me, and it suddenly, like, your brain turns it into a real thing, and it was just, I don't know, the shadow of a car driving by outside the window, right? So like we come to understand all of these concepts by researching how the brain works. But yeah, anyways, the question, you had a question.
Well, no, but not a question. Just I was just gonna kind of go off what you were talking about, like different levels of consciousness. So I know sleeping is like a completely different kind of topic, but they are kind of correlated.
Mhm.
So when you're sleeping, you're not considered conscious, but you could hear a noise like your alarm going off. Like I could be asleep, and then I hear my alarm going off, and I dream that I hear the alarm, and I actually turn the alarm off, in my sleep without waking up. So
Mhm.
I was conscious. I was aware of of the actual reality of the real world around me, but yet I was asleep. So what do you guys feel about that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I've had full conversations with people before, apparently. Like, I mean, I don't remember him, but yeah, like I looked up, after the fact, like the next morning, and saw the phone conversation, and it was like at least 5 minutes. I wasn't super intelligible during it, although don't know how exactly intelligible I am, conscious and awake. So, but the point was, yeah, I mean, we this is the same with like sleepwalking and stuff.
Yeah.
When your body, and we have done some really cool studies with dreaming that has helped us understand this more. And when sleeping, humans seem to oftentimes go through this 30-minute cycle period, and each of these different periods have a pretty radically and noticeably different brainwave pattern, right? Because of the different parts of the brain that are super active. For a long time, we thought, your brain just basically turns off when you go to sleep. Now, obviously, that's crazy. How the hell does your liver keep functioning and your heart keep beating and all of that? Of course, that has to still be going, but it took time to figure this out, people. But yeah, I mean, we've now really come to this understanding that truly when you're sleeping, like your brain is easily as active as when you are fully awake. It is just a massively different part of the brain that is much more focused on these, again, I think what we often call like more basal type stuff. I don't think that's derogatory. I don't think my heart beating constantly is any slight to it or anything that I don't think about. That's good. That allows us to do these cool things like having YouTube channels and stuff, is because I don't have to always think about the fact like, oh man, is my lungs going to keep expanding? Are they going to keep working and providing oxygen to my bloodstream? That'd be great, but yeah, dreams are cool, man. Sleep is super cool. It's very interesting. We definitely don't know enough about it. And the more that we look into it, the more we realize how incredibly important it is.
Yeah.
Like the lymphatic system wasn't something that we really had a good handle on for a long time, but there is something very, very vitally important to the chemicals that your body synthesizes when you're asleep and when you're awake. And it, this could have a massive effect on a lot of other systems in our body, right? Because we're not going through these biological processes, because we've got all these lights around us all the time. We're always up at crazy hours. We're all doing it. None of us are sleeping well, and yeah, maybe it's fucking with us in a lot of ways.
Okay, so there is a condition. I forgot what it's called. No, I forgot the name of it. But basically, what happens is a person, it's very rare, obviously, but a person can remember literally like every minute of their lives, and they can tell you what time they did specific activities, and they can give you like very detailed description of what they did, who they were with, etc. And what scientists decided to study these people, they found that their patterns of sleep were different than the patterns of sleep of the average person. And what was happening was like their memories were being consolidated more effectively than the rest of us who sleep like shit. So I guess they sleep properly in a way. They sleep better in a way. Yeah.
There is there. Go ahead, please.
No, well, I was gonna say we discussed that before about when you're sleeping, your brain is actually storing your long-term memories. I think AJ had told me that before.
There is some. That's exactly what I was going to say. Okay. There is some stuff out there on that really does seem to indicate that is really, really vital for memory retention and stuff. And back to things like dementia and Alzheimer's and things. The understanding of those, neurological illnesses and stuff has helped with some of that study too, because we were noticing, these patterns in a lot of these patients, and we were like, man, like, why are they never sleeping? And it's like, it's because there is this connection between it. Like it's really, really cool, man. I mean, and the more that we learn about that stuff, the more we will be able to help with that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, that would be awesome to be able to give somebody a pill and reverse literal Alzheimer's. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, or like figure out like how their sleeping patterns throughout their life could even completely prevent it.
Yeah, I've been listening to this conversation for the last, I think, 15, 20 minutes or so.
Sorry.
And no. This is brilliant. This is why I was so excited about coming onto this show, because I think in the last 15 or 20 minutes, I have heard, I think, 10 or 15 different things where I think that's a really interesting rabbit hole we could dive down. That's a really interesting rabbit, from meditation to soul, to sleep, to dreaming, to the way the brain takes in information and assesses information, which, by the way, not enough people know how that actually works. And I think it's really, really interesting that, it's, when we're having these conversations, so many people will sit there and be adamant that what I have experienced is perfectly accurate, and they haven't got the first clue how the brain works. And the brain is not an accurate thing at all. It doesn't assess information accurately. It's really shit at it, in fact. It's one of those great evolutionary things. I have this people who don't believe in evolution out there, this evolution that doesn't exist. It's one of these really good. The brain is a really good fucking example of how evolution actually works, and how it is really inefficient in some areas to make other things efficient and useful. And the brain is really, really good at that. And how brains essentially work on the day-to-day level, because they are programmed to spot patterns, and they are programmed to spot something in the forest or in the long grass which is going to jump out and eat us. And we don't want to be eaten, so we suspect everything. We suspect everything. And another thing in relation to that, which is really, really important to understand with how the brain works, is that we don't walk around seeing the world out there and walk around and assessing all the information from that. The majority of the information, when we're taking in, if we go into a room that we've never been in before, the majority of information from that room is actually coming from previous memories of other rooms and our expectations of what we expect in a room. And this is why when we go ghost hunting in dark locations, there's a reason people ghost hunt in the dark. And it's not because the ghosts are more likely to come out at night. It is because it's a lot easier to fucking trick you into thinking something is there. So our brains work in the picture we have of the world is stored in memory largely. That's how we form the picture of the world. And then the bits that come in are a very, very small part. And it's something like 85, I don't know the exact figure, it's something like 85% of the information comes in through our eyes, which Jamie the Blind Lima really beat me up on one day. But most of that information comes in through all that information that comes in through our senses. That's not the way we picture the world. Most of it's from memory, and that small part of information that comes in is actually cross-referenced by our very good at making mistakes brains with that information that's coming in and with that stored memory. So that's why we see things that fucking aren't there all the time, literally all the time. And you can be, I do it all the time. I do it on a weekly basis, and I constantly tell stories about my latest episode of I was driving down the street and it was raining or it was dark and I thought it was a person and it was a sign by the side of the road. We do it all the time. We just don't realize we're doing it. And if people took more attention, if people took more notice of the kind of meditative aspect of how we kind of assess things. And I think what Elliot said about meditation was really, really important. But the more you meditate, the biggest benefit of meditating that I've noticed, because I've been doing it for a long time, and the biggest benefit of it is not these great, fantastic, wonderful, ethereal sometimes experiences you get. The greatest aspect for me is the noticing things that you wouldn't normally notice, and you can the biggest way that I ever noticed that happening in situ was when I was waking up one morning, and I've told this story many times, and I literally saw two girls dressed in Victorian dress forming at the bottom of my bed as I was waking up. And had I been a believer in ghosts, I would to this day swear that I had seen two Victorian girls stood at the bottom of my bed. But because I am not a believer in ghosts, and I understand how the brain works, and I understand kind of, I've been meditating for a long time, and I've been kind of assessing these things as they take place for a long time, in situ as they are happening, assessing these thoughts as they arise and fall away. I was waking up. It was the shadow. It was a play of shadow and light coming through the curtains, and some fucking weird memory I must have been dreaming about. It all mingled together and formed these things. And just for that split second, that light, that shadow of play of shadow and light at the bottom of my bed resembled two Victorian girls. And I was able to assess it as it was happening and realize what it was as it was happening. But if I hadn't had that training, and it is brain training, if I hadn't had that brain training, I would have to this day swore that I'd have seen two ghosts.
Yeah,
And
you and I have.
as simple. That is as simple as it can happen.
Yeah, I was gonna say you and I have discussed this term before, pareidolia, which is like where your brain sort of looks for patterns of things that it has seen before, and it fills into whatever new image or thing that you're presented with, and it sort of will take you over to your past experience and not sort of.
And it happens all the time. And I mean, I use that rather extreme example of those two girls because it is an extreme example of it. But it happens to us all the time, and I notice in my own brain, and I bet there's thousands every week. I bet there's thousands of times it happens to me, and I don't even realize it's happened.
Yeah, like you see somebody, you're on the street walking, and you see somebody with wearing something that I don't know, family members worn, and you're like, oh, and then you have to look twice to make sure that it's not, that person. Like we're constantly doing.
And if it ultimately is not, if you're walking down the street and there are hundreds and hundreds of people passing by you, right? Your brain is gonna pay attention to the most important features. And one of those most important features is gonna be, is this person trying to attack and kill me? And if they're not, just like we were talking about earlier, your brain's just gonna move on because it's not vital information for this moment. There is so much information that is constantly, bombarding us on a moment-to-moment basis. There is no way for us to, even with the incredible processing power that we have, right? But what we do is we learn the shortcuts, exactly like Richard is saying. We recognize that in our experience, almost always, if another person is here in this space with me, that's not the best thing, right? We need to know if there are other people around us, right? So when you walk past that lamp in the darkness, it makes sense that your brain puts together the pattern of a person real quick. It's like, oh shit, watch out. They're gonna kill you. And then you go, oh no, okay, my bad. And you move on from that. And you don't remember that experience as anything particularly fantastical, right? But that one time you're waking up and the ghosts literally materialize at the foot of your bed. Oh my God, that's huge. And your brain locks into that. and it remembers this over and over and over and adds all these incredible details and stuff. We do this with all kinds of stuff because, again, every second of our existence really is this kind of after the fact type of thing, this like post hoc rationalization that we're doing. We experience information, we react a lot of times due to those past, experiences that we've had. And then a few minutes later, somebody goes, "Hey man, why'd you choose vanilla over chocolate?" And you're like, "Oh yeah, it's because vanilla has a much better footprint, carbon footprint on the environment." And you're like, "Yeah, really though? I mean, was that really why you made that decision?" But again, that'll go into some free will stuff too, which I love to talk about that as well. But yeah, this stuff really
Rein
affects us.
yourself in, my child. Rein yourself in.
I can't.
Yeah, man. That was a good one. Yeah.
Well, on that same topic though, about your brain just filling in and creating something like that, would illusions be similar? Like I could still see this today, like, but I remember as a kid, like when we were on road trips, I don't know, in Texas when it's really hot and you're looking down the road, but this is probably more light play, and you see, I guess the way ahead on the road, it looks like there's water, on the road, but it's just, I would assume it's just the way light's reflecting and the way your brain is taking in that information. And then when you get closer to it, you realize there's, it's just the road.
That is
Has anyone
actually
ever
the heat.
experienced that before? Yeah, the
It's
heat.
the heat,
Okay, so the
actually.
heat.
Yes.
Okay, causing
It's the
that.
heat
Okay.
evaporator. Yeah.
Yeah, but that exactly has played on us for so long as people, right? And what has happened so many times is, either or a couple of different ways, but one way is, somebody's living their life and then they see something like that and they don't have a ready explanation. And so they just do the best that they can to describe it. And we get all these fantastical stories. There are also times where, the magician is fooled by their own magic, right? Nowadays, we have these big arenas and it's a stage and we got these laser lights and you buy a ticket and it's a magician, and they do these fantastical things and it's so freaking cool. But like a long ass time ago, it is highly, highly possible some dude did something and then went, "Holy shit, how did I just do that?" And other people were like, "Man, that is why every fucking time we try to put these rings together, they don't work. But you somehow can put them together and then pull them apart, even though they're unbroken. They're completely unbroken. They just 1,000 years ago didn't have the ability to be like, oh, wait a second. There's actually like micro cuts in these
Yeah, to
that
be able to figure
when
that out.
aligned perfectly, So yeah, I think sometimes it just, we as individuals, because we have this super awesome processing machine, but also really, really crappy processing machine at the same time, we just fooled ourselves. We're like, "Oh man, I'm walking on water." And it's like, yeah, not really, actually.
And I think it's really interesting as well that when we look at kind of religion as a whole, or supernatural belief as a whole, it's not a surprise, people, that in cultures where people are culturally believe the same thing largely, they come up with a narrative to fit that. And someone 3,000 or 5,000 miles away comes up with an entirely different narrative. But very, very importantly, and I'll use the example that AJ was talking about the soul earlier. In kind of Middle Eastern cultures, we had this idea of the soul, which has come up. It's actually an idea which has largely come from the Middle Ages. And like the early days of Christendom, because in the Old Testament there wasn't a soul sat in the human body. It was breath of life. It was the breath of life, so it was a different thing. But if you have a look at the idea of a soul as this person inside of you, and then you go across to India and look at that, when you don't, in some things like in Buddhism, you don't have a soul. you have the five khandhas, which are clinging things that we cling to, aggregates that we cling to, and it is those things that are reborn. So the very, very different ways of explaining an idea that we've got about humanity. And it's the same trick that's going off in both things. It's the same way we're being deluded. It's the same bad epistemology which is giving us those answers. We want those answers. That God of the gap thing Elliot's just been talking about. We can't explain this, therefore it's this. That's the best explanation we've got. We're going with that. We're going with, even though it's not adequate, we're going with that because we want an answer. So we're going to go with the five clinging aggregates over here in Buddhism. In Judaism, we're going for the breath of life. It's the spirit. It's a breath. It's a spirit. In Christianity, we're going to go with it's a soul. It's a person living inside of us. And a person like ourselves living inside of us, which animates us. And it's all these different concepts, which are all built on the same bad epistemology and giving all these different answers because people crave answers. And it doesn't matter whether you can do it on an individual level, you can do it on an inter-religious level, like in Christianity, and look at all the wild different beliefs within Christianity that disagree with each other, which contradict each other. You can do it on an intra-religious level, and you can look at Christianity against Hinduism, against Buddhism, against Judaism, against Islam, and all these different ideas that come from that. Lots and lots of different beliefs, starting down with an individual, working up to an entire religion, to an entire culture. But it's the same thinking process in every case, and that thinking process is and I'm hugely dumbing this down here, but that thinking process is essentially, we want an answer to this. We can't find an answer through a method that corresponds with reality. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take the first thing that we can grasp that seems satisfactory to us, whether it's true or not. And I think when we understand that, it becomes a lot easier to jump from talking about epistemology when it's to do with ghosts, or epistemology when it comes to God belief, or epistemology when it comes to supernatural belief. And we can kind of look at the methodology of why we believe certain things, rather than just saying, well, you believe in this thing, but why don't you believe in unicorns? Well, some people do, genuinely do. Some people, a lot of the times people say, well, nobody believes in Thor anymore, or Freya, but there are people who genuinely, in Scandinavian countries, who genuinely believe that Freya is a real person. So and it's culturally bound. So once we get into that idea of assessing why we believe something, then it becomes really, really interesting. And it's like learning a mathematical formula. Once you learn the formula, you can apply it to different questions. And I think that's a really, really fascinating thing about this kind of study and conversation.
Yeah, personally, for me, that is the most effective argument against religion, any religion. And one of them is the near death experiences, because when you look at the near death experiences of a Muslim, a Christian, and a Hindu, they are each going to be completely different. And they all claim that they that they saw themselves in whatever you want to call their afterlife, okay, heaven or whatever name you give them. So yeah, then like, how can we claim that, I don't know, Christianity is the one true religion when somebody else is experiencing this afterlife based on what their past experiences have been, like what religion they have been mostly culturally exposed to, as Richard just mentioned, is all extremely culturally based. And when you look at people from different areas of the world, you are going to see completely different experiences of near death, of hallucinations. I mean, I'm sorry, what they will call visions, which we know now are potentially
Hallucinations,
hallucinations. Yeah, so it's like, to me, that's one of the biggest arguments against any true afterlife.
I think that's why the question when somebody says, prove God exists to you. Sorry, prove God doesn't exist. One of the best questions you can ask in response to that is which God? Because I've heard this a million times, and I can guarantee Secular Rarity has had someone a million times when he's tried doing the comparative religion thing, and they've turned around and said, yeah, but those religions aren't true. Christianity is true. Or those religions aren't true. Islam is true.
Yeah, they got it wrong.
But you can't just say that. The question which God is really, really important, because it's very important to kind of tease out when you're having these conversations the fact that yours isn't the only opinion. We had a caller on Talk Heathen the other day. I can't remember what the subject was. I think it was when me and John were on, the Godless Engineer, and we'd both kind of said to this guy, it's really important to, when you're having these conversations, to tease out which kind of, the fact that when you're asking these questions, it was an atheist guy, and he was talking about asking questions of religious people and being in close contact with religious people, and we'd both kind of said the same thing, which was, don't concentrate so much on the difference between you and that religious person when you're having these conversations. Perhaps point them into to the fact that there are other religious people who disagree with them, and get them thinking along those lines. So you're not othering them. There's too much othering going off in our community. I think you're a theist. You believe in ghosts. You're a theist. You're not worthy of the same level of thinking of me. You're not as clever as me, or things along them. I think it's a load of crap that we've got to get that out of. Talk as if you talk. My best friend is a Muslim. The guy who was the best man at my wedding is a Muslim. And I think it's very important to kind of, when we're talking to someone we disagree with, get that part of their identity out of the way and talk to them as if they're your best friend. Talk to them as, as if you want to, have a genuine conversation, but not take up a contrary position to them. And I think that does a lot of benefit to us moving forwards with people who want conversations. Not everybody does. People just sometimes want to throw a gotcha, and that's a completely different kettle of fish. In that case, just tell them to fuck off and punch them in the nose. But if you've got someone who wants a genuine conversation, it's no matter how different their opinion is, it's always good to start with looking at them as if they are your friend, as if they are your peer, someone you want to spend time with.
I always... No, go ahead. Well, I'll just say, if a person feels attacked when you're discussing things with them, then they're going to be shut down, shut off completely to accepting anything that you're saying, in that aspect, basically.
Yeah, you both hit the two things I always like to say is have these discussions with compassion and curiosity. It's really, really important, because genuine curiosity is the way that I think we will learn the most about the world about us, right, or the world around us, right? And it is also, we have all had those moments in our lives where somebody asks a question about something that we have taken so deeply for granted for so long in our own lives, right? And they ask the question and we dismiss it at first, we're like, yeah, come on, what are you talking about, man? And then they'll go hey man, no, I mean, seriously, what, how do you do that? I don't get this. I've never heard about this, and you just have that, there's this noticeable shift of emotion inside of you, where you just go oh, yeah, oh yeah, man, hey, yeah, let me show you, like, let me explain, like, this is how you do that. Or like, yeah, they've been doing this every year in November, for like 30 years or whatever. Like, it is a fascinating moment to be in, both, as the person that's experiencing that from somebody else, or the person that is experiencing that themselves. And again, that just kind of goes back to meditation, I think, in part, and being aware, being focused on the information that is coming to you, and also something you've all kind of touched on, which is about how your assumptions, your perspective in general, when approaching new information, will affect the way that information is received, and that can really play a lot on how you navigate yourself in the world and how you move forward. And that is not me saying, just in case anybody gets the thought, like, I'm saying this, that is not me saying that, like, oh yeah, the whole world is actually just inside your head, man, we're really in the matrix. It's like, no, that is not. No, there is external information that is coming into us, but we have shown time and time again that the way that each of us is getting that information, what of that information that we're getting, how we're synthesizing it, how we are developing responses to it, how we are justifying those responses after that. Like, that is a huge spectrum. And the more that we are conscious of that, and the more that we are watching our own biases and our own presuppositions coming into this situation, the more, again, we will get an accurate understanding of the world, right? And I think really hard, I really believe this, you guys. I could be convinced out of it, but this is something I stand pretty strong on, which is, I think I can demonstrate to everybody how their own standards require accurate understanding of the world around them. I really do. I really do believe that I can show people that they value this, right? Like I said to somebody once, hey man, well, we're not consistent, and his response was, which is a fine response. His response was, well, why do we value consistency? And I thought about that, and I was like, man, huh. And I eventually came to the conclusion that the reason that we all value consistency so much is because if there is consistently a lack of consistency, it's impossible to navigate. If one doesn't equal one, like sometimes, or like just tomorrow, or like if you aren't standing facing east, then like we don't have the ability to actually progress, like if your car doesn't work the same way every time. When you go to start up your car, you take the key, you put it in, it goes ding, 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 because you didn't shut the door. You shut the door, you turn the key, it goes vroom. If that doesn't work the same way every single time, man, you don't have a functioning car, So it's like, okay, so that's part of it. That consistency aspect is something that we do care about, right? And then there are all these other things too. And again, that perspective and how much we ourselves are aware of that perspective when going into these situations really matters, And I get frustrated a little when having these conversations sometimes with, especially, it doesn't happen as much with the religious as much, I feel like, with like the ghost hunters and the Bigfoot people and the aliens and stuff. They tell me that I just don't want to believe, They tell me that I'm just not open-minded enough, you know, and that it gets under my skin because it's like, no, I'm genuinely curious about this. I really want to understand. And just to be honest, if your world is right, that's kind of a cooler world than the one that I see. The one that I live in, lamps don't just float because otherworldly beings decide to pick them up and fuck with us. In yours, they do. That's fascinating. That's so interesting. I'd love to live in that world. I feel like when investigating this information, we get to these places where I go, oh, hey, man, this is inconsistent. And they go, well, why do we care about consistency? And I go, well, I think we both do, you know, and we have to start all the way back over again. And then we make all the progress. And I still feel like we're in the same boat. I still feel like at the end of the day, what better explains this situation is not that your house was haunted because it was built on top of a burial ground, you know? I think it was kind of messed up that the builders put it there. Probably could have picked a better spot than grandma's grave. That being said, I think it's a creaky floorboard and some weird drafts, my brother. That's it. You know, it's just bad. It is our awesomely super cool processing machine that is also awesomely fucked up. You know, it's just making a mistake again. It's okay. That's fine. Just take that information in and orient yourself further, you know? And that's where I see so many of the problems coming in. People that will avoid sections of town. They will go out of their way to avoid a section of road because they believe that it's haunted, right? People who have kicked out family members, right? Because they have demons in them or they do witchcraft or stuff, you know? It is so obvious why this type of thinking can get us to these really, really bad places, you know? So it's not that I don't want to investigate. It's not that I don't want to believe. I absolutely think, man, that's a world with unicorns and Pegasi. That's the world I want to live in, y'all. And that is the proper plural there of Pegasus. But that's a cool world, man.
I was wondering.
Yeah, right. We've learned a lot today, you guys. You know, transitory anuses. That's
and Pegasi.
Transient
anus.
Transient. Thank you. Yeah, that does make it sound better because honestly, that reminds me. That makes me think of like a hobo on a train from like the 30s. You know, with like a stick and a knapsack, like an anus
riding on the boxcar.
Yeah, you just giving everybody something to think about.
Hey guys, we live in a world now where there is AI generating software, and I'm not saying that anybody should, but I am saying if you want to type that phrase into some program that makes images, and
the sad thing is I just visualize that in my head, and I'm very visual, and it just like popped up. I see the train boxcar.
It's not a good image.
But
I think
if you do, please email it to us. Okay.
I think what Sal's just said is really important, and you know, I think one thing out of that, because I've noticed this as well, that it tends to be the people who believe in ghosts and Bigfoot and aliens and their own special brand of religion. We sometimes get callers to the shows when I think there was someone on the Atheist Experience last week who had his own special brand of religion. And he was putting that forward. It's not a god like the Christian God, right? It's a different kind of God. It's my special God. Yeah, nobody else. And I think, and there are lots of those kinds of people out there. And I think, and I have had more pushback from those kinds of folks too, as opposed to the religious folks in general. And I think it's because kind of religious people have this well-established idea of what they're supposed to be believing and what the answers are to that. Even if they've not looked into it greatly, they've got a pretty good established idea. Whereas a lot of people who kind of are taking on the ideas of ghosts and things like that, they don't have so much of an established framework surrounding it. So the questions as to why do you believe that, I think there's a lot of pushback a lot quicker on those subjects because they don't have those answers readily available, and they do have to think about it more. And when you're on the spot thinking about it, I think that's when the pushback comes. And I think, in my experience, certainly I think that's why we get, I mean, I don't have many of the Bigfoot conversations over here in Britain, but certainly the ghost conversations is a big one. The aliens conversations is a big one. And I seem to get a lot more pushback and a lot more angry pushback from those folks than I do from the religious folks.
They take it very seriously.
Yeah.
They do not enjoy being giggled at, which, you know, hey, totally understand. No, I think definitely something you said there I really, really liked about kind of the, you know, the vagueness of a lot of these other types of beliefs, right? That I totally agree with you, fall exactly into the same category. When it comes to religion and God and stuff, they're using the exact same poor methodology for coming to conclusions and whatnot. It is perpetuated a lot of these beliefs on an individual level because of the lack of specificity, right? And I think that that's a fascinating distinction between, you know, like organized religion that we can think of and a lot of this type of stuff, because that exactly what you were talking about how in a lot of these places, there is this doctrine, there is this codified understanding, like believe X, believe Y, don't believe Z, you know, but believe these things, you know, very specific, right? And that is something that really helps those institutions continue, right? But when it comes to stepping away from that, and a lot of people that are in these, you know, I believe in an afterlife, I believe in souls, ghosts, you know, aliens, a lot of those people do have history in these more dogmatic, doctrinal, you know, kind of belief systems where things are really spelled out for them. And I think it is then that lack of specificity that draws them to that, right? Which helps keep that belief going, because they've been in a space for so long where it was like, you must believe this, you cannot think that way, blah, blah, blah. They're rejecting that in part and attaching themselves to this similar space where they're finding that comfort, they're finding those answers that give them some grounding to help orient themselves forward, just like religion did. But because it has that wiggle room, they like it so much more, right? I mean, I see this in and I'm so sorry if you get shit for this, just by the way. Like, feel free to attack all your hate mail to richard.gilliver at but in the pagan community, in a lot of those spaces, I will watch two individuals say things that are like clearly not aligned, right? About like how they view a soul, or how they view the afterlife, or magic, or karma, or whatever it is. And yet they both at the end of it are just like, yeah, so it's the same. You know, like, we're in the same camp. And it's like, oh my God, that's fascinating. And you know, from my experience, maybe I need to just talk to more people, but from my experience, when you address that with those individuals, a lot of times they will say like, well, yeah, like how it manifests for them is different, or their experience of it, you know, and it's totally fine. Like, we are still, you know, focused on the same thing. And I really think that's interesting, you know? And I think that's why those beliefs are not as institutionalized, right, as the Catholicism of it, as the Jehovah's Witnesses of it, you know? Like, yes, there are obviously Hindu temples. There are obviously, doctrine and stuff, but so much of that is a lot more sporadic, a lot more disparate, a lot more of just kind of this, ball of sticky goo that we roll down a hill, and like some stuff sticks for a while and then it goes away. And the same people in the same region are like, yeah, we kind of thought that for a while, but not really feeling it so much anymore. It's very interesting and fluid. And again, I think that's a feature of a lot of these beliefs. If we don't have a super well-defined understanding of what we're talking about when we're saying a ghost, when we're experiencing a ghost, right? When we're explaining to others this effect in the world around us was because of a ghost, if we don't have a super good understanding, it's a lot easier to really pinpoint it and poke holes in it, because like, is there ectoplasm involved? Like, well, no, not really. And it's like, oh, okay, well, so then can't do a test for like ectoplasm to disprove it or anything. And it's like, well, okay, so does it have matter? Is it made of mass? And it's like, well, not really. And it's like, okay, well, okay, maybe like dark matter, like dark energy stuff, maybe, but like we can still kind of detect that. And it's like, no, it's this other material. It's something in between those. And it's like, oh, okay, well.
That's interesting because when Joe and I were talking about doing this show, before we booked you guys, we were discussing um, the term ghost and how we realized that each of us see both the word ghost and the word soul completely different. For me, it was more like the religious definition, and for him, is I guess I'll let you explain how you see it,
A
Joe.
ghost or a soul? Which one are you
I
referring
guess
to?
I guess both, because I mean,
Yeah, well, I've never thought of the term soul to be associated with religion. As you know, your soul was created by a higher power, and it was put there. And if you follow that God, that your soul will get to the one, and then for eternity and in heaven. I never used it, never thought of it in that sense. A soul to me was always just kind of like that inner being that's like living inside us, like whether it's
Right.
a higher power that put it there. It's just an energy and my sense of feeling in my head. It's just like, I don't know, it's just energy alive inside my body that all my thoughts and stuff are able to communicate and interact with reality. But I never saw it as something religious related or connected to a higher power.
yeah, I think I would say it's more like a definition of a mind rather than a soul.
See, I
And for
always,
me, was more like the soul, like the whole blob that comes raises up from your body when you die. That's the way I saw a soul and a ghost for me was one and the same.
yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
I kind of think of it like soul is to ghost as person is to zombie. It's like it's like you have a soul right up until the point that you die physically, and now if your soul is still here, it's a ghost. It's a ghost is
Yeah,
a
yeah, that's
soul
it.
that died at some point. But like,
Yeah,
but to be honest, but because I've never really like said that out loud before, and to be honest, that
same.
doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense, because what is the soul? How does the soul die? It doesn't. And it comes, yeah, but yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of the operation I've been living under for a long time. But again, never really thought about that.
It's
I'm
really
actually,
interesting from the Buddhist perspective as well, because we were talking about, or I was talking about earlier, the five khandhas were these things that are reincarnated in Buddhism, not being a soul as such, but they're in one of the 31 supernatural realms of existence in Buddhism. One of them is the realm of the hungry ghosts. So these five khandhas are actually reincarnated into ghosts. So the ghost is a being in of itself, like an animal or a human,
Interesting.
in which these clinging aggregates are reincarnated into. So they're completely separate entities.
Yeah.
In that perspective, so it's completely different to this Western idea we have, or this modern Western idea we have of a soul, like a ghost in the machine, as it were, that's kind of controlling things and then jumps out and leaves an empty shell and jumps wherever it jumps, into another one or into
Well, and
God.
you can see both sides of that, I think, really easily. Like there is this, not everybody, we know with more study of, neuroscience and whatnot, but overwhelmingly there is this sense of, oneness. There is this sense of identity. I know when my hand touches something, I have this memory of yesterday and petting a dog and all that nonsense. So the idea of like, okay, it is this singular entity, right, makes some sense. But also the idea that it's actually 4, 5, 7 separate entities that all kind of come together also makes sense, because we've all had those moments where it's just like, hey man, I don't know what I was thinking. I think I was really hungry and I'm so sorry. I really apologize. Something took over me, and so, yeah, I mean, I can totally see why we would come to, both of these conclusions. And I don't think, because this is something that is often, leveled from the religious side, I don't think that that is an indication that there is this soul or anything, right? I think what that is an indication of human thinking. I think that both of these concepts come from receiving the information around us, coming to that new information with these presuppositions and biases, and filling in this blank when we don't have good information. And again, this is we get to these conclusions in the exact same way that we get to the conclusion, hey, there's a lion in the bush, when there isn't. Or, hey, there's this God that cares about what I do and is watching everything. Or, hey, there's this ape-like creature that has somehow evaded capture and detection for millennia, but is still living in the United States forest somewhere. Man, you're gonna get a lot of hate from the Bigfoot crowd. I'm really sorry. I wasn't intending
It's
going
okay.
into this to to shit on Bigfoot so much.
Say,
You
hey
know,
man,
this
Sasquatch is
one,
real.
Yeah,
you have a shirt to prove it.
yeah. Bigfoot's a myth, but Sasquatch, that's correct.
So they're
The
not the
Yetis.
same. Are they really different? I always thought they were the same, but
I think it's such a good, such a really interesting, fun dive to compare the Yeti and the Sasquatch and the woodland ape and I mean, there's all these different things that all kind of come into, what is this fuzzy picture that kind of at the end of the day makes you go like, oh yeah, man, there's some understandable reasons why people would get there. Same thing with the soul. It's like, I totally understand the concept of an animating breath. Like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. Have you ever seen somebody stop breathing in front of you? It's weird. It's strange. And it like, if you don't know what the Heimlich is or CPR, right? And you see something like that, and then you see them start to breathe again and start to be animated again, oh my God, it would absolutely radically imprint in your brain like, oh, there is something about this breath. There is something about this air that's a big fucking deal for people, It makes total sense why we would get to that conclusion.
Yeah. I have actually seen somebody stop reading this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's striking. Your brain definitely and again, you've got so much information coming in all the time. The stuff that is really, really important, your brain sticks with. And a moment like that will absolutely stay with you for the rest of your life. So of course you're going to tell everybody from then on about the spirits and stuff. Like, yeah, of course.
Yeah. So this conversation reminded me of a study that I heard about, and it's basically regarding how somebody stands so firmly in whatever they believe in, right? And it showed that people often think that they have all the facts, and they called it the illusion of information adequacy. And basically the study was like they had like 1,000 people and they split them into three groups. And the first two groups, they gave them half of the information, but each half of the groups had opposing information, right? Half of them, the opposite of the other half. And then the third group had the complete picture. And they showed that the people that had half and half, they were like, well, no, my side is right. And the other one said, no, my side is right. Like they felt that they had enough information to make an informed decision about the situation that they were seeing. But once they were put in the room with the people that had all of the complete picture and they were given the complete picture, they were like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So they sided with the third group that had all of the information. And that goes to show it's the same way when we're having a conversation with somebody, um, whether it be a theist or a ghost believer or a Bigfoot believer, then when you're more curious, when you're asking questions of the other person and them having give you their side and you give them your side, it's more likely that you're both gonna eventually come to the same conclusion and sort of meet in the middle. I thought it was a pretty interesting study, and that really could help people make better come up with better solutions to all kinds of problems.
Yeah, I think that's super cool. And again, definitely something that I really do feel like we've all had that moment in life where we are very confidently walking forward, striding proudly, and then somebody goes like, "Hey man, did you forget your pants?" And you're like, "Oh, my bad. Oops. Yep. Some new information was just provided." But like, yeah, seriously, we've all had those moments where you're thinking something so freaking confident. You are so sure of it. And then you turn the corner and it's like, oh my gosh, all of this other information now is here. And oops, yeah, I'm just gonna change that. Yeah, my bad. That's important. That is deeply important. That doesn't mean that we paralyze ourselves and
don't let that in,
right.
no,
And
I'm wearing pants, I have
right.
pants on, I'm not gonna look
Right.
like they're on.
Or not make a choice, right? Like, we will never adequately know everything about our food supply, guys. That does not mean starve yourself to death. No, there is still information here that we can make decisions on, and we should use that information. We just have to make sure that we are willing to accept that new information and be cognitive of those biases and perspectives that we have to begin with.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest
So-
fields I've seen with where people get excited, and it's because I think, and I'm not even an amateur. I'm just a layperson in this. I just enjoy the field of kind of astrophysics and stuff like that, cosmology. Really interested in it. Know fuck all about it on an academic level. Let's just put that out there. But I think watching people speak who do know about it, it's a really fascinating, because in my field, in religion and philosophy, which is my academic field, a lot of the stuff is well established already, and new ideas aren't so much new ideas. They're just regurgitated ideas, but were, looked at from a different angle, which is very good. There's nothing wrong with that. But in something like astrophysics, so what I've noticed is there's so much excitement when they have got something wrong. And it's such a striking field, and I love that. I love that about astrophysics.
Yeah, I love hearing Neil deGrasse Tyson say the same thing. He's always like, when I'm wrong, I'm like so excited because I can learn something new now. Joe's actually reading one of his books right now about black holes. So it's like,
when current theories are being challenged in astrophysics, you don't see what you get in kind of in most people in the daily lives. And the way we respond to things, you don't see that kind of, well, I'm going to cling on to this because it's dear to me, and I'm going to cling on to it for as long as possible, and I will accept change, but forcefully. And when you're looking at fields such as astrophysics and someone's well-established theories like knocked to shreds, they're like, yes, come on, we're going to learn something new. Let's get in there. Let's get in. This is fantastic. And I think everybody could learn a lot from that kind of attitude, having that kind of attitude towards all these questions that we're asking.
I love that. Yeah, but before we move on from the ghost talk, because Richard, you told me that you used to be in a group that you were kind of like the skeptic, ghost exploration thing.
Yeah.
So Joe and I used to watch, like as I mentioned earlier, we used to watch all these ghost hunting shows a lot, and we will see things like, they will film things on thermal cameras, or like I don't know, white noise and like audio, and they will like isolate these voices, and you will listen to it, and they will be like, whoa, okay, like somebody's actually saying something. Like how did you, for example, like tell us a little bit more about what you used to do and how you would like debunk like all of these different situations?
Sometimes I didn't debunk anything, and
Okay.
I think that's really interesting to know, because there were a couple of things I tried to find a couple of photographs I took from one of these things earlier on, and I couldn't find them. I don't know, they've probably been lost to the realms of the internet somewhere. But I took a couple of photographs it was a bathroom in an old pub, and the owners of the pub have graciously given us free reign of this pub for the night to go and explore. And I took a couple of photographs in this bathroom where people were having experiences of being watched. And this was one of those moments where, even though I'm a non-believer, I've never really believed. I might have had some vague ghost belief when I was like 8, 9, 10 years old, but I've never really been a big believer in ghosts and spirits as things. And it's one of those moments where you look at it. It was when I was looking at the photos back when I got home and I was reviewing all the photos, and I kind of stopped and went, "What the fuck is that?" Because the best way I can describe it is a kind of shapeless black mass. But I took 2 photos in sequence, and it looked like this shapeless black mass was kind of a person bent over. And kind of in the second photo, it looked like they'd unbent a little bit, as though they were like bent over on the floor and then trying to stand up in the second photo. And it was like, I put it on a negative because it was really hard to see. And I negatived it, and it was just this kind of white mass, with no definitive shape. So it was clearly something in the photograph. Now, I have no explanation for what that was. My best explanation, and it's not a definitive one, my best hypothesis as to what it was because the pub was on a main road and it was quite a busy road, and that bathroom window looked straight onto the main road. And I think that it was because the photographs were taken in quick sequence of each other. I think it was the light coming through the window of some distant headlights and the sequence of photos. But I don't know. What it was. That's one of the things I've never been able to debunk. I've got ideas about what it is. I certainly don't think it was the ghost of anything. And I think this is really important when we're talking about this, because we've got to take account of candidate explanations. And when I was in that ghost hunting group, everybody who believed in ghosts hated when I used to bring up the phrase candidate explanations. Because you can take, and I'll give you one example of something that happens lots in haunting cases. Something's jumped off the shelf. Well, let's look at the candidate explanations of what that could be. Could it be the spirit of a dead person, which requires lots and lots of extra kind of layering of ideas on? If you're looking at an Occam's razor kind of thing, which is not the simplest explanation that makes sense, it's an explanation with the least amount of assumptions. is the most likely to be right. Look at the extra layers of assumption which need to be put on for it to be the spirit of a dead person. There's lots of, first of all, we've got to know there's an afterlife. There's some kind of soul which lives on. That soul can interact with the physical realm in some way. Lots and lots of extra extra layers that have to be put on.
Implications,
Yeah. Or we can have, let's look at the other candidate explanations. And this is just off the top of my head here. We've got things like micro earthquakes. We've got things like strong breezes. We've got loose floorboards that can be vibrated.
Cats.
Yeah. We've got even very, very, very unlikely explanations, which are, as far as I know, have never been recorded in physics, but are possible. And possibility is also something which is very important. All the atoms in a certain object could move in the same direction at the same time.
True.
Meaning that object to our perspective, moves of its own accord.
Yeah.
That's physically possible. It is a physical possibility.
Yeah. Micro black holes.
With the supernatural. Very unlikely things.
Technically.
But still much, much more likely and much less assumptions than the spirit of a dead person. And when you start looking at things, when you start looking at haunting cases, with that in mind as one thing, added on to the fact that we know the brain makes mistakes, added on to the fact that we know we can see stuff out of the corner of our eyes and be misled by it, we can have audio and visual hallucinations. When you start adding all this stuff into the equation, ghosts become real, even if you believe in them, become really, really unlikely candidate explanations for what's happening. Regarding the kind of equipment side of stuff, that's not something I really got involved with. I had to listen to a couple of tapes, the EVPs that people claimed they'd recorded. And I don't have now, but at the time I had a music set up. I'm a musician and I had a music, like a little home studio. So I used to run it through the software I had. And never once did I hear what I was supposed to be hearing, what the person had suggested to me was there. I can tell how they got to that from what was there and how they may have misinterpreted it, but I didn't get anything that in any of those things I looked at, and we're probably talking hundreds of different voice clips over the course of the years I were doing it. I never got one that I could identify as an otherworldly voice that, wasn't something explainable or something that could be misinterpreted.
Well, and I think that motivated reasoning is definitely something that comes into play here. And again, this is why I focus on that a lot when having these conversations. And I think it's very important for us to all be aware of our biases and our presuppositions and stuff. Because there's so many times I feel like I've had this conversation, with different people, pretty much same format, same structure. They talk about some really crazy experience like you were just talking about, man, it wasn't until I was developing the pictures, man. I felt something there, or, we heard some, but wasn't until I was, and then I saw this, and you can't explain that. And you go, well, I mean, you kind of can, because like we know that cars drive by, right? Cast shadows and lights and things. We know heat waves can show up on film. Like there are thousands of these explanations, and the person listens to all of those. And I've watched this happen so many times, and they go, yeah, maybe, right? Like, yeah, I guess the concept of it being under a vent and the vent turning on and air pushing it, yeah, I guess that's there. But it's kind of not as good of an answer. I don't like it as much. The world doesn't seem as cool like that. And it's like, yeah, man, I get that. I do. I totally understand that. Again, the world where Bigfoot and leprechauns and unicorns are all hanging out in the woods together doing magic and witchcraft and shit, that is a cooler world. I don't disagree with you, man. I'd read that story. I'd subscribe to that channel. You know, I'd be there. Thing is, though, again, like, I don't think that's the case. And I think we have really good reason to get to that conclusion. And again, it's because exactly what Richard was saying, like time and time and time and time again. Maybe we don't have a perfect answer, but there are like 1,000 other bullet points that we really got to make sure it's not that one first. Like, how do you know the horse just wasn't standing in an awkward position, man? You know, it's like, no, I saw it, man. It had wings. And it's like, did it though? And it's like, I saw it, man. It took off. It flew. And it's like, did it though? You know, did it really? Are you sure it just wasn't a really large bird and you just weren't super close to it? Like, you're kind of blind, aren't you, Bill? And it's like, no, I'm not. Well, I'm over here. So, you know, you know, that type of shit, right? We really have to be diligent to make sure that all of these other explanations that we absolutely know are real, like manatees and dolphins, 100% are real things. Okay. We really need to double, triple check that they weren't talking about a manatee before we just go to, no, actually. So what it is Atlantis, a super advanced civilization from millions of years ago, was sunk underwater. And then people over time evolved into highly intelligent fish hybrid things. And it's like, yeah, man, I don't think so. I think dolphins probably make more sense than mermaids.
that horse thing you said was really interesting because it's before I tell this story, I'm just going to say, why are you so obsessed with fucking Bigfoot today? Is it because you
I don't know.
It's because he's done his hair.
Yeah, I don't know.
Got Chewbacca hair
I don't
today.
know. I just woke up. I
should have put it on the title.
Yeah, I didn't know I was going to talk about Bigfoot this much.
Yeah, you're gonna have to change the title of the show out there.
When I was about 17, a couple of friends of mine and myself we slept over in someone's car. It was the kind of the thing we all told us parents we were going to sleep at each other's houses, and we went and slept in a car and got drunk instead. And but near where I live, there's lots of countryside. There's lots of open country, and one of the guys who was with us was from a place which was predominantly city, so we'd not been out into the countryside before. So we'd kind of woken up at kind of 2:00 in the morning and walked down this country lane to take a leak and whatnot. And as we were walking down this country lane, this guy who was from the city, he literally shat his pants. He just grabbed hold of me and this other guy we were with, and he's like, what the fuck is that? And we looked into a field and there was a cow there. And it was just a cow. It was just a regular cow. This guy genuinely believed. He said, we said it's a cow. What the fuck's wrong with you? It's a cow. He went, I thought it was a giant dog, and it was just because it wasn't. He'd never seen a cow in the wild before, so his brain went to the first thing that he was used to, which was apparently dogs.
Yeah,
and it just shows how easy it can be to mistake something when it's unfamiliar to you.
And it again. It makes total sense. You can see the thought process there that's going on, right? Like the squishy lump inside this guy's head is doing something very similar to how we would all experience a situation and why certain things would jump out to us, right? The idea that there could be a wild dog that large out there, y'all just completely vulnerable with nobody's got fucking hunting gear or shit with them. That thing would mess you up. That thing would eat you alive and not leave a single trace for the cops tomorrow, you know? And like, yeah, it's kind of a good thing that your brain does this automatic, like, oh fuck, what is that? And then, you know, then this is the important part. I think this is where I really like to focus again, is we have that moment afterwards where we think about the stuff, right? So it's like, oh my God, it's a ghost. And then it's like, right. I get why you got that. I get why we went there. Now let's think some more. Like, for instance, one of my favorite things in a story where somebody tells me this fantastical occurrence that just can't be explained through any other means or story or whatever. They go on for 5-6 whole minutes, giving all kinds of incredible detail. And then they go, yeah, and so me and Terry finished off the bottle of tequila we've been drinking for 3 hours. And I'm like, oh, well, man, you drunk, man. Well, yeah, man, you know? Or it's like, yeah, and so then we rolled our 4th blunt of the night. And it's like, well, yeah, man, you stoned, man. Like, I mean, come on, man. Like, I'm not saying you didn't have a crazy fucking time with your buddies, man. It does sound like that. But I'm just saying, like, you should be able to go through this moment here and go, oh, yeah. Like, if somebody else told me this story, you know, I love Richard, right? As much shit as I give him, I love Richard. But if Richard came up to me and genuinely was like, hey, man, you'll never believe this. So last night, horse with a horn, okay, came up to me on the street. I was just walking, came right up to me, went like, hey, Richard, how are you? And I went, I'm pretty good, magical horse. And it went, no, please. You know, magical horse is my father. Call me unicorn. And I was like, wow, what an incredibly pleasant unicorn you are. And it was like, thanks so much. And then skipped away and then said to me, I had just finished off a couple bottles of Jameson. I'd be like, yeah, man, Richard. Yeah, I mean, come on, man. I mean, you great and all, man. You but like, you know what happened, right? You were drunk. You were fucking drunk, man.
Sounds more like mushrooms, man. Sounds
Yeah,
more
well,
like
yeah,
mushrooms.
exactly. Yeah, those are the best. Like, somebody's like, man, I saw this crazy, fantastical stuff. And it's like, yeah, that sounds awesome. And they're like, yeah, so I was tripping balls on some acid. And it's like, well, oh my God, man. Like, why do you think, like, come on, dude. I totally get. That's how I feel about. I'm sorry. I'm just going everywhere. I'm getting hot about stuff. That's how I feel about like microdosing. It so frustrates me when somebody tells me how like the world is so much better and stuff when they're microdosing. And it's like, yeah, man, you're high, man. I get that. You don't have to explain. If somebody came up to you and was like, hey, man, so I'm doing this new thing. It's called micro shotting. It's where I take half a shot of whiskey every hour on the hour. You'd be like, well, yeah, man, I totally get why the world is better all of a sudden, man. You're a little bit drunk. Like, it makes me think so much better. And it's like, I don't think so, man.
It's like you're editing your whole experience, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I totally get that. You don't have to explain that to me. That doesn't take much effort. You know, again, that's like, I'm not going to keep going. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean,
No,
like, there are so
that's
many.
interesting.
Yeah, like there's so many different explanations that we can figure out for all of these supernatural things, whether it be Bigfoot or magic rainbow farting unicorns and ghosts. And one of the ones that Richard mentioned earlier was the voices that he'd never been able to debunk. That, I'm sorry, to find any type of voice coming through the recorded audio. And if when I think back to the shows that we used to watch, I'm like, well, that totally makes sense, because if you really pay attention to what they were saying, they were like, at the end of the show, it was after they had recorded everything and went to their studio and run it through a program and like adjusted the settings and like isolated this part and the bass and this and that, and then they came out with this thing, and you've got to listen to it like 5 times before you can
To be able to
say
actually hear
that,
it, yeah.
oh yeah, it said
And
hello.
on these shows, they're very, very, very good at priming you as to what it's going to be saying
Yeah.
before you even get to that point.
Yeah.
Well, the one that we used to watch was it was called Taps, Ghost Hunters here in the US, and they were always at the end. I like to watch it because it was more like an adventure to me, but it wasn't more like I was like believing that they were gonna see some type of entity. It was more kind of just like the adventure that will they catch something that will actually prove that that there are ghosts. But at the end, they would always usually debunk everything that they would have. I never really
Yeah.
the one show that we watched, they would always at the end never really come to a conclusion that it was actually something supernatural that they caught on camera or they caught on audio. To
Yeah, I
me,
remember one. There was a person where they were feeling like they were going into this. I think it was
it was a basement. I
a
think you're talking
basement,
about.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and they were like feeling all these emotions when they came into that area, and they were like nauseous, and like they would have like some sort of like visual type of hallucinations. And then so they came in and they were like scanning it, and it turned out that it was an old type of equipment that was leaking like some
it
type
was
of
it was electrical
electricity.
panel, so it had like high
Yeah,
EMF. It was like it
And
was
that's
causing
actually
people to like
really
hallucinate.
important.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
stuff is actually
yeah.
really like there was a I've told this story 1,000 times. I should actually remember the scientist's name by this point, but there was a scientist that was studying something totally different. And he was in this like lab in a basement. And he noticed over a couple of months, like he started getting really agitated. Like and he was noticing this total change in his body. Like his sleeping patterns were fucked up, his eating habits were all of this weird. And so he stopped doing this other experiment and started trying to investigate this because it was so clear to him that it came on right around the time that he had been working in this lab. And so he started investigating this to the point that he would eventually discover the AC unit in the back of the lab was producing a low hum at a particular frequency that was not being picked up by him consciously, but his brain was definitely fucking hearing. And it was pissing him the fuck off. And because he couldn't figure it out, it was causing all of this stress and anxiety to like build up inside of him and stuff, And like and the same, there's been other similar types of things where somebody has been like, oh man, I don't go into like this room in my house, it's really creepy. Every time I go in there, like I start to throw up, and I'm pretty sure it's a ghost. And then we go in there to find that, oh my gosh, there's actually a massive black mold problem, like, and
yeah,
that stuff is real. Again, we are receiving so much information and shit like that. Mold spores, you're not going to pick that out. You're not going to turn around and just be like, oh, there's one, no, but it's going to have all these effects on you that cause all of these. Black mold causes hallucinations.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, there it is. Your house isn't haunted. We need to clean it,
yeah. Somebody in the chat said that sounds like me and fluorescent lights. And yeah, I've heard that also about fluorescent lights, or like, I mean, the way that flashing lights can affect somebody who has a predisposition for some type of seizures. I mean, it's like there are so many different things that can affect the way that your body responds.
Yeah, reacts to to the environment.
Yes, wow. Yeah. Okay, so there was a discussion in the chat earlier, and somebody asked about your hair, secularity.
This is my normal hair.
There is a background story here, guys. Okay, when I was making the
yeah, I know it was you,
the
Titan.
thumbnail, yeah. Okay, so when I was making the thumbnail for the show, I'm gonna post it for a second. All right, so this is the thumbnail. I did it with AI, with Chat GPT. So I go in there and I find a random photo of Richard and a random photo of Rarity, and I put it on there and I'm like, hey, make me a cartoon version of these two people. And I kind of gave it a description of what I want them to be. Like Richard, I wanted it to include the guitar because I know you're a musician. I was like, keep the glasses on and this and that. And then for Rarity, I was like, I remember that when we met in Austin, he had a shirt on, which we actually have on right now. There we go. And there was like at least 4 people that commented on that shirt, and they were like, "Oh, such a cool shirt." So I took a close look at it. I was like, "Oh, okay, cool. It's an animal." In my brain, I thought it was a raccoon, right? So I told ChatGPT to give him a raccoon shirt, and it went and gave him a raccoon tail and like this
I did look good with
huge
it. I'm not gonna-
hair.
Yeah. Yeah.
I sent that photo to them privately just to make them laugh, but I wasn't gonna use it. But anyways, all of the next photos of SR that will come up were all with the big hair, so I couldn't get it to make the hair longer. It would just make it like bigger. So when I sent Richard that picture, he was like, "Well, now if you don't show up with your hair, fluffed up, then I'm gonna be very disappointed." So
Yeah.
we kind of forced Secretary
Yes.
into blow drying his hair. We yeah.
You know, I'm here for the community. You know, I'm always willing to go the extra mile.
I'm gonna say that's some real commitment for sure.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
See, you know, it was a lot of work. It cost a lot of money, weeks and weeks of planning to pull off such a great accomplishment. But again, this is just my normal hair, so there's nothing different about it whatsoever. I do not have a raccoon tail. I do not own a raccoon tail. So,
yeah, we probably wouldn't expect that in unless you're into.
It is our state animal, though. I mean, the raccoon is Tennessee's state animal. So,
It is.
like,
Wow.
yeah,
Interesting.
little trash panda.
I
Yeah,
happen
that's
to know that you were rooming with J Mike, and I'm fucking so messaging J Mike to ask him if you actually do have a raccoon.
Just double check real quick. Yeah, just be like, hey man, not to get too weird or anything, but does he have a raccoon tail? You know, we've
When
never
you were
actually
asleep at
checked.
night, did you feel anything big and fluffy crawling up your back?
Right. There is, I mean, honestly, like it is an open question. We don't know. I feel pretty confident about saying this, that I have never appeared on camera before with the like lower back to buttocks region being exposed, you know? That's right. Until proven otherwise, I do in fact have a raccoon tail. That's right. We don't know. I'm just asking questions. You know, some people are saying, actually, that's my favorite one to use now. Okay. The I'm just asking questions was funny years ago. But now my favorite thing to say is I've heard some people talking, you know, I love that. I think that's the greatest thing ever. You could just say anything that you fucking want and then just follow it up with that. Just like, for instance, you know, there's this guy in politics here in the United States.
I was going to say, it sounds like somebody similar that I've heard.
Well, I was just going to say, and there's a couple of people, you know, that have done this, but for instance, I've heard that there's this guy named Roger Stone. I've heard people talking about him in politics in the United States, that apparently he is actually a sack of sentient worms, that what he is a skin suit of a human being and has been stuffed with magical sentient worms that originate from a large pile of shit. Now, I don't know if this is true. I am saying that some people have been talking about this very seriously. Some people are very concerned about this, and we should check it out. I just don't think we should dismiss them out. Right. Some people are talking about it.
Right, like Titan Uranus says that they're not saying that you have a raccoon tail, but I'm not saying that we don't know that you don't have one. So I mean,
People have been talking.
It's completely plausible. It's completely plausible.
There's a lot of people out there on YouTube right now that are talking about this, you know. So
but that is exactly how we come up with good conclusions, right? Like we just talk about we need the evidence, and until you show your ass, then we'll never know.
Well, let me talk to you about my OnlyFans.
Go ahead and put a plug in. Put a plug in.
Yeah.
Anything goes here. Anything goes. This is.
I think that will violate terms of service. I always try to. I'm willing to push it, right up to the line, but I never want to get somebody's actual channel kicked off.
I know, right? Like, I don't know exactly how far we can go. I know you told me before feet are off the table,
Yeah, I feel
so
pretty confident you can't. You cannot pull your pants down and show your ass on camera.
I
Um,
mean,
you
if
know,
they don't allow feet, then
right,
yeah, I would
right.
think that
I'm not
yeah,
confident. I'll be honest. I have not read the full terms of service, so it's
same,
possible that
same,
it's
same.
in there. Right?
I'm sure there's somebody we could ask. Somebody in the chat probably knows. But
Yeah,
until then, yeah, until then, we're gonna force you to
we
show
just don't know.
anything.
Yeah,
Um,
we just can't know. We just can't know. We do know though. Again, Bigfoot, not real. But
but they do want you to dance. I don't know. That's not my request.
that's it's so much weirder like dancing when there's no music whatsoever. It's just really really awkward. Um,
I could
but
put something on if you give me like a
no,
second
I already did
He's
it.
like-
Don't give
He's
Titan.
like,
No,
he's like, I'm
Titan
good,
has
I'm
gotten
good.
way too much already. No. Do not give them any more ammunition or anything. Yeah. They don't.
Okay, they're asking about the feet situation. I know you've mentioned
I
that to me once. What is
what
the story there?
I'm pretty sure it's like so like you can show your feet on a lot of these platforms, but I think it's like if you're specifically doing it in an attempt to like arouse and stuff, because people like get sexually
There's such a big
sexually
market
aroused.
for that.
It is,
Yeah.
and and I
I don't
guess
know. I mean, some people like elbows.
yeah. I just kind of feel like, and it's just I'm definitely not. I like what you like, folks. The feet thing is something I've never
Richard's
myself
gonna get his ban.
gotten. Yeah, he's just got feet. He's just got feet. It's so great. I don't know. There's some times where I think like I wish I could try it, for a day.
But
I wish I could
feet,
try being really, really attracted to feet for a day, just to see what the world is like. Because I've just never really it's never been my thing. And I've known a couple of people. I've had some friends in the past, and we've had long conversations about it. And yeah, they're real cool, and they're like, yeah, man, it just really does it for me. It's just like my thing. And I'm like, man, that's so, so yeah, just if somebody ever figures out how to, I don't know, temporarily give you kinks, I don't know exactly
Okay.
how would you,
Feet
right?
attraction.
You could like try
There-
it for a couple of hours. That'd be really interesting,
Look, there goes the conversation of free will, man. You don't have the free will to
No.
like feet. What are you talking about? What?
No, you're forced. You are forced into liking or not liking feet. There's just nothing you can do about it. Like,
Okay, is there like a complaint department we can send God about like the free will of feet?
I'm sure there is. These
I'm
people
just-
these priests keep talking to people for some reason about all their problems. They haven't fixed a single one of them, so I don't know. Maybe they're passing them on. I don't know what they're doing, but.
I'm sure God has like a mailbox somewhere filled up with complaints
Yeah,
about
he's just
why
yeah.
can't I enjoy feet?
It's like way behind on responding to them all. Yeah, I like that thought. He's God is actually trying to get to all of these. He's just like, a few thousand years behind, and he's responding to like he's like hitting up Jephthah, and he's like, nah, man, hang on, don't sacrifice your daughter. That's not a good one. I don't like that. And kicks that off, and it's like, mailer demon, this cinder has been dead for 3,000 years or whatever. He's like, shit. Yeah.
I think that's probably why it took him 400 years to figure out the slavery thing. Maybe.
Yeah, it was a tough one.
It was like there was like a backup in the middle.
Yeah, that was an issue. Yeah, all these people praying to keep slavery. A couple of y'all praying to get rid of it. It's like,
and then there was the free will of the slaves.
Yeah,
and like, man, you gotta like consolidate the whole problem over there. Yeah, that's a tough one. So okay, let's go back for a second to because I just when we were talking about the AI graphic, I had a question and then I forgot it, and then now I remembered it again. What do you guys think about AI? I know that a lot of people think that AI could become conscious. I don't believe that that would be a thing, but do you think that AI could have the potential to cause like pretty severe issues with between humans? Like I don't know, one example would be like the spread of misinformation, right? You see, I don't know, I've been seeing, like I was telling Joe the other day, I was watching some random TikTok videos and one of Billie Eilish came up, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then I realized that it was a video of her and she wasn't saying anything, she was just moving, she was just sitting there, and Justin Bieber was doing her hair. And I was like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. So I looked closely and you could see, like, you know, the fifth I'm sorry, the sixth and seventh fingers of Justin Bieber's hand, and I was like, oh, it's AI. So like there's like all these types of spread of misinformations, and if you don't have the hands, it's kind of like hard to tell if the image is real or not. Then like how far would that go before that causes like some sort of collapse of the internet, to whereas it's mostly misinformation and horrible stuff being spread, like lies about people, like destroying people's lives with, I don't know, sharing pornographic images of somebody that wasn't actually doing an act, or you know, like what do you guys, how do you guys feel about that?
I think we're kind of already there.
You
I
think
mean,
it's
there's
like,
a lot of that already out there on the internet. I
We,
mean,
we
so
do
much
have X, the
disinformation.
X platform.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah, for
yeah, and
sure.
it's full of stuff like that.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think this technology will continue to get better. Probably excuse me. Probably to the point that it is indistinguishable.
mhm.
I don't know about conscious. I don't know if it'll ever break that barrier. And I think in part that could just be because of how I view consciousness, right? Like that's just, again, you know, trying to do the best I can to understand my own presuppositions and stuff. I think I put that in an exclusively biological realm. And so because of the fact that computers aren't biotic in that sense, I think that's a big barrier for me that I need to understand some more stuff before I feel confident that computers will, you know, be able to breach. I think there's something very specific about like how living material fixes itself, and that is something that is very, very different from computers. That I think it has a lot more to do with consciousness than we
Yeah, I
recognize
think
just yet.
one of the things that made me think of that as well was when you said that they had mapped the brain of a fly,
Mhm.
was it? And I was like, okay, well, if they could do that with a human brain, wouldn't that mean that they will be able to sort of replicate? But at the same time, I don't know if they could fully replicate the
Right.
function of the brain, right? Like you
Because a
could
big part
replicate the mapping, but not how it.
Right, because a big part of the brain is that ability to grow, disconnect, reconnect, you know, neurological pathways, right? So that is a big, big deal about like muscle memory. That was a really important thing for us to understand, and to literally be able to trace the pathway from one neuron to this neuron all the way over here going like this, and then to be able to physically see a different pathway and trace the neurons again, and it goes like this. It's like, whoa, that's crazy, that's cool. Again, computers can't do that just yet. Now that doesn't mean that they won't, in my opinion. I think the biggest places that we have a potential for problems is exactly where you were talking about, the misinformation type of stuff, as well as the errors in coding, right? That technically the computer is right. Like it's following the coding to the logical conclusion. It's just that our human foibles, right, are now present in this code. We messed up and we wrote in this code, and now the computer's just doing it. And it's like, oh no, wait, that's bad. That's killing all the zebras. Stop doing that. Please don't do that. That was a mistake. And yeah, that's where I see some real potential for harm.
Yeah,
And I
I
think,
agree with
yes,
Sarah on that.
real
Oh,
quick,
sorry.
it's super quick. I was going to say that it's not just the brain that will be mapping. Like there will need to be external stimulation. Like we all use our senses. Like our
Mhm.
brain uses our senses to respond. So yeah, okay, go ahead, Richard. Sorry about that.
No, it's not at all. I agree with SR and you, what you've just said on that as well. I think the biggest threat is in misinformation through AI. I have no, literally zero, and maybe it's because I'm old and I'm probably going to be dead before it happens, but I have literally zero fear of AI somehow becoming fucking Skynet and taking over the world,
Yeah.
Terminator style. I have no fear of that whatsoever. There's a neurosurgeon, or was, I don't know if he's still alive, I can't remember, called Antonio Damasio, and he said no matter how close, we've progressed a lot being able to see images of what people are thinking. We can it says I can foresee a day where we can literally see photograph quality what someone is thinking, but we will never be able to experience what they are thinking. And that, I think that plays a big role in this conversation about AI becoming sentient, or technology becoming sentient. It's regardless of how much we can map it, we're not going to be able to get to the point, I don't think, where we can imitate it to the point where it actually becomes sentient. And maybe imitate is wrong word, because imitation is what we're doing. We are imitating,
Right.
but we can't actually create that
Right.
thing to be sentient itself at the moment. And I think if it will happen, it'll be a long way down the line. Interestingly, I can't say too much about this. I have a friend who is writing a book on AI. And I've seen a couple of chapters of that book, but I have been sworn to secrecy, and that is literally all I am going to say on that subject.
What a dick.
But there will be a book coming out in the near future about
It's
AI by somebody who knows this kind of area of study, shall we say.
That's like going over to a buddy's house for a party and bring in a real nice bottle, and then just being like, hey man, I just wanted to show you this. I bought this for myself a week ago, and we're not going to drink it tonight. I just wanted you to know that I've got it. And it's like, man, what the fuck, man? It's all I'm going to tell you is there's this kick-ass book that's about to be written that's perfectly on topic here. Oh, thanks, man. Yeah. Appreciate
You can't have any of it.
Yeah, right. No. No, I do. I think there is, it is a truly fascinating aspect of technology that we have created. I think there is going to be a lot of really, really great stuff that comes from it. I also do worry if we don't put safeguards in place,
Exactly.
So I am very, happy when I see those individuals that come out and talk about that. I also think, it's worthwhile to be cautious about what we're saying, and don't be out there freaking everybody out talking about how the robots are taking over, next week, right? And they're all going to infiltrate our brains because they'll, whatever. I don't know. It's like, let's moderate ourselves and be accurate about the information.
And that's very, very important. I mean, even this kind of Russian invasion of Ukraine, there's a newspaper in the UK, and I think I'm not going to name it because it's shit, and I don't want people to even go and look at it just to fact check the shit I'm saying about it because it's that bad. I don't want to give them any views whatsoever. But they have been ever since this Russian-Ukraine situation set off. I think almost on a daily basis, they have been touting headlines such as Putin about to start war with Europe, Putin about to use nukes on Britain, Putin, and all misinformation stuff, all just nonsense, fear mongering stuff. And we need to regulate that kind of stuff. And having something like AI without those regulations in place regarding misinformation specifically, I think we have got to be very, very careful with it. We've got to be very selective about where we take our sources of information from, and very kind of deep diving in. Even if we see something we think is trustworthy, just do that little bit of extra. Just I often cite there's like various popular science magazines that are out, New Scientist and Science Focus and things like that. And you can buy like monthly subscription magazine type things, and they're very good. But even they use like attention grabbing headlines, which you need to go and look at the studies to verify. And so even innocent and pretty good sources of information use this sensationalism. So when we get to the kind of more unscrupulous people who are definitely going to use this kind of misinformation, I think it's up to us as individuals to apply skepticism, critical thinking, and discernment, and take that extra step. Yeah, it takes more energy to do so, and it takes more time to do so, but we really do owe it to ourselves to do it.
Yeah, and we do have, even as somebody that is very much not on the side of free will and choice, we do have the choices. We do have the ability to make change in the world around us. It doesn't feel like that all the time, because things can be pretty daunting and fucking terrifying. And how the hell one person doing XYZ? But we don't think about a lot of the work that was done to go into a lot of these, institutions or activities that we're taking part in. I hear people all the time talking about mainstream media and how there's such a big problem with all these people getting their information. And then I ask, or I listen to where they would prefer the information come from, or the presentation that would be most acceptable to them. And I literally heard this the other day. I heard somebody who has been part of the mainstream media in an integral way for decades. This has been their career. They have done this for a while. And they literally said to somebody, well, I just kind of think we should just tell people it's going to be like this. And then the other person went, yeah, but that's just not true. Like, that's just not the information, right? Like, it's not like, where are you getting that from? And the person just went, I just feel it. I just think that's how we should operate. News anchors should just go out there and just tell people stuff that they're feeling. And then if it doesn't turn out to be true later on, oh well. And that was literally what they said. And I was, oh my gosh, that's wild, man. Like, do you not understand that, like, Thomson Reuters, for instance, the Associated Press, these types of institutions were founded, like 100 fucking years ago, because some dude died with a shit ton of money and was just like, I want to make sure that news keeps happening. And over the decades, they have built up systems in place to be able to provide reliable information. They're not always correct, of course not. But when they find out they're not correct, they actually update that shit, as opposed to, hey man, weren't you the dude that said like the world was gonna end like in September? It's December now. We're still here. And he's like, yeah, man. So anyway, the world will be ending in January of next year. Stock up now. It's like, what are you talking about, you fucking idiot? Like, no. We need to have reliable, trusted institutions when it comes to understanding the world around us, because to be honest, that's how we've gotten here.
Yeah.
Like, we don't think about the fact that, oh my gosh, you know, a long ass time ago, we didn't even have a horse and buggy system. We hadn't even figured that shit out. We got the wheel and we were like, that's super cool, man. And eventually, you know, some people came along and were like, wait a second. If we put multiple wheels on a basket, guys, we don't have to work as hard, you know? We don't think about that when they make the new goddamn Jaguar or Audi, but that is what people are talking about when they're saying standing on the shoulders of giants, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
We have developed so far in this process that now when somebody comes up to me and says like, well, I don't think you really understand the double slit experiment, you know, about what it tells us about, you know, us living in a simulation and the observer effect and blah. And I'm like, man, I don't think you really fucking understand it, because to build the machine to do the double slit experiment, to build the computer to analyze the results of this experiment, they are built on these other foundational principles that still 100% apply. Why all of the sudden now all that shit just goes out the window? That doesn't make any sense, man. No, it's still going to operate in this. It is most likely, I caught myself there. It is most likely going to still operate in a system that corresponds to what we've got. It makes the most sense. And if you're coming along positing something completely outside of that, that is okay, my friend. I am happy for it. I am here for it. Let's look at it. But just like, you know, understand it's on you, right? Like, everybody else likes this song that we're playing at the party right now. You showed up and said, I don't know that techno is the right vibe. You know, let's do punk rock. And it's like, okay, but everybody here at the party likes the techno. You it's on you. Make the case, man. Maybe punk is better. I'm down for some Ramones. Let me hear it. But you know, again, right, currently, yeah, man, Bigfoot's not real. Fuck you, all you Bigfoot. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean. I felt like I was circling it, but I never really.
Also, we all know that Green Day is better, so yeah.
Because of the Ramones, yeah.
There you go. There you go. See?
Yeah.
I just want to make a statement. So you have these news organizations, though, that are 24/7 now, that we didn't used to have that. You know, you used to get the nightly news like once a evening, you know, now it's 24/7. Now we have the internet, everybody gets their information from. But then you have these organizations that they function under, calling themselves an entertainment versus actual news, so they can get away with basically saying whatever the F they want, and you know, it doesn't even have to be like true.
Some people say, I hear people talking about, I'm just asking questions. Absolutely. And we as a society, right, and it isn't just something that is a United States or, you know, US, UK, Europe, you know, this is something that we do see across cultures, across time span, right? Like, okay, so maybe some of y'all have heard this story before about the entire Dutch economy collapsing from the price of tulips. You ever heard this story? Fascinating little story of history, where supposedly somewhere in like the 1400s, you know, as as like the ideas of capitalism and stuff are really coming around, and people are traveling around and getting all these cool things. Well, a bunch of people in Holland really started buying these flowers. Next thing you know, the price of a single flower is going for somebody's home, right? And so they're trading all these, and it just completely bankrupts the whole fucking economy and causes this massive collapse all across Europe and so forth, right? Super crazy story, except it didn't happen. It didn't happen. But it's been told for centuries. People have told. I literally remember reading in a textbook in class a snippet about this story. And they referenced a document that was found in like the late 1600s, early 1700s or whatever. This guy had written about it. This guy was writing and he was like, man, you remember that time dipshits collapsed the whole country economy buying flowers? Wasn't that nuts? Except for the fact that he was a satirical newspaper writer. It was a joke from the beginning. From the beginning, it was a joke. And the joke was so good to everybody that heard it at the time that they kept fucking telling it. And next thing you know, the joke of, so a priest and a rabbi walk into a bar turns into, no, seriously, this priest and rabbi walked into a bar and cast demons out of this man. We as people do this. This is something that is so innate to us, man. And so now we're just so far away from so much of this stuff. And we don't have that piece of information that just clearly is that thing that goes like, hey, actually, everybody knew Bill was joking about that. Like, he wasn't really, his cow really wasn't abducted, you guys. He just said that to his daughter because he didn't want to have to explain to a 3-year-old that her best friend just got murdered so they have food for the rest of the month, like, oh, I got abducted by aliens, little Sally, like this is what we do. This is what we do as people, and that's okay. That's cool. Actually, that's really cool. Just, we should,
Yeah,
do our
I
best to
remember where
try
I
to
heard
check
it. It was Seth Andrews. They had a video recently about exactly this topic of why people are so stuck on believing something, and it's just because they've heard it so many times, and repetition is what works. And so I think in his video specifically, it was about how indoctrination works, and how when you hear something over and over again, it just becomes ingrained into your brain that
Yep.
is the truth. No matter what opposing information comes to you, you're still going to continue to believe that.
I think the overarching kind of theme for everything we've been talking about over the last 3 hours or however long it's been, there is that we need to check ourselves regularly, and kind of just keep a check on what it is we're accepting as true and why we're accepting it to be so. I think a long time ago, well, I've been meditating now for 20 years or so, but a long time, probably 15 years ago, I came up with this little experiment for myself, but I often use it to kind of just throw out to other people, just to kind of watch yourself. And it's turned into kind of an epistemological thing I do, but it was started just as a meditation aid for me personally, when I was traveling places by bus. I just drive everywhere now, but I used to go by bus a lot, and it was just something to do to pass the time while I was doing that. And that is when you're out and about in your daily lives and you see somebody in a t-shirt that has some kind of slogan on or a picture on, just sit and notice your reaction to that thing, no matter what the thing is, whether it's a positive reaction, a negative reaction, whether you feel it might be something that you feel kind of you're against, it might be something that it might be a band you like, so you might feel feelings towards it. Just notice when you see people wearing t-shirts out and about, how you react to those things. And it's a really nice little aid to kind of getting yourself into being in the moment and assessing things as they arise within you. And it's a really, really good little tool, simple tool to use, just to kind of get you into this thinking. Right, this thing is arising in me now at this moment, because we've talked about a lot of the mistakes. We've talked about a lot today about the mistakes that we make because the moment has passed and we're trying to assess them in hindsight. So it's a really, really good little tool just to kind of get you to assess things as they're arising in you and noticing things and how you respond to them. And it's really good way of kind of trying to not eliminate bias, but to recognize bias in yourself.
Right. And that's important. That's important. I hear so many people all the time talking about trying to eliminate, get rid of it. And it's like, no. It just really doesn't seem like that's going to be the case, right? Maybe. I'm not going to say that it can't. Maybe. But it seems like we're always going to come to this with those biases. And what we should be doing is checking on them, right? Again, back to meditation, because I think there are some really, really good, through lines there. And one, I remember a long time ago hearing somebody describe, like, think of it like a mountain, right? Big mountain sits there, cloud passes by, mountain's still there, cloud's there for a second, cloud's gone next second. It's not about trying to get rid of those clouds in your mind as the mountain. Just noticing them, just observing them, and just noting this is here. This is something that is happening in this moment, right? And if feelings start to arise, again, taking that moment to just go like, man, I'm kind of bummed out about that cloud. That's not necessarily good or bad. You're not putting a judgment on that. You're just noticing that this is what's coming up. And honestly, funny enough, there is a through line to secular therapy for that stuff. So my therapist, I found through the Secular Therapy Project, wonderful, amazing organization. And this is something that we have talked about in the sense of, those moments in life where you're feeling a bit more agitated, a bit more anxious, a bit sad or whatever, and reframing that perspective instead of this like, man, I'm sad and this sucks and this is terrible, right? I hate this and all of that, right? In more of this context of, okay, I'm not feeling super great, today. And like, maybe I just don't want to hang out, or maybe I'm not going to feel that good after eating pizza or whatever it is, right? Like, I'm just not going to enjoy the concert as much as I thought, but that's just where we are, right? And not really putting that judgment of good, bad, I want this, I want that, or anything. That all of that is really, really helpful, I think, when it comes to doing this whole scientific method thing. I mean, truly, because what we will come to find, I think, is the more that we are accounting for those biases and the more that we are not trying to get rid of them, but just recognizing them and bringing that information to others and kind of matching it against their biases and bouncing off. And so that's really what we're using to progress forward. That is the methodology, right? Time and time again. That seems to be it, man. And again, we talked about this, earlier on, and I always love tying, things together as much as possible. That's why I don't want to shut people out. That's why I don't want to say that the religious can't participate in this conversation. That's why I don't want to say that, the Buddhist and the Imam can't come to the conversation about consciousness and ghosts. Yes, come along, join in, help us out. Let's learn. Let's metal sharpen metal. We will get to a better answer. We always have. I'm going to be honest with you. And this might sound kind of shitty, but I'm gonna be honest. I think my side's probably going to come out better. I really, really do. I really do. I feel pretty good, man. We are never gonna do this and walk away coming to the conclusion like unicorns and goes. I just feel confident on that. That being said, let's look. I'm with it. Let's look.
But that's where the difference is when there's ignorance because of absence of knowledge, and when there's stupidity because somebody
Yeah.
is rejecting
The
that
knowledge,
knowledge that
yeah.
is
For
there.
sure.
It's like you can determine that something is true, and you have that information there if you're open to that information. But if you completely reject it, then yeah, that's just gonna leave you in another kind of ignorance.
Well, that's one of the things with religion. Like I used to, like I was never a very religious person. I definitely didn't grow up religious. I do have family members that are religious, but I always had the view of religion as just like love. But as I've learned more, as AJ has kind of like given me knowledge on religion, like I've never read the Bible, but she tells me verses and teaches me the Bible, the things that she learns, and it makes me realize that religion, Christianity in general, is definitely full of so much hate, and it's definitely not love. I mean, and I've changed my whole perspective on that view. So I mean,
Yeah, I think like a year ago we would discuss this, and I would be like, it's so harmful. Like I was, watching all the ACA shows, and I was listening to the calls and stuff, and repeating, like telling Joe about the calls, and he was like, oh, it's not that bad. Like people can't be that. Like religion is not that harmful. Like there's plenty of good things about it. But now he's like, man, he sits and watches the shows with me, and
I'm
like
like, that's
he's
like
just
just
like,
fucked up.
oh man.
It's like-
And that's good to. I think it is really, really crucial when having these conversations, especially, um, to remember that moment, that switch, right? To remember that, like, you didn't just suddenly become a phenomenally great person, right? And it wasn't as if you were just some wretched piece of shit before, right? It's not like you've just gained, a whole 100 IQ or anything. Like, no, you're a human being that is evaluating the world around you. And sometimes we get shit wrong. Actually, probably more often than not, we're getting shit wrong. Like we probably wrong about stuff right now. I mean, and yet it's again what you were just saying about that openness to that new information and trying to move forward, right? And when we get so focused on our side of it, on the non-religious side of fighting and pushing back and debunking and falsifying and all of this stuff. And I get it. I love that stuff. And it's very, very important. But we can get a little too focused on that and forget that we are talking to a person, forget that lucky Richard over here, fucking asshole. But, the rest of us, a lot of us were in this boat years ago where we were thinking some of this shit. And it took investigation, it took curiosity, it took compassion, and it took time. And, hey, man, I get it. Not everybody has all that and wants to put it out there. Yeah, don't do it. Like, no worries. You don't have to. You don't have to go set up a table and a sign down at your park. You don't have to do that shit. No, man. No. Like, let him yell at Richard, man. That he'll do that stuff all day. He loves that shit. So, but if you want to, right? If that's your goal, and you have the desire to have effective communication, you have the desire to see change in the world around you because of the way that people evaluate their beliefs and so forth.
Yeah,
Well,
we have some family members that are very religious, and like we love them, and they are amazing people. They're smart people, and like we can completely separate that
Mhm.
their beliefs from the person that they
But they
are,
are,
and
yeah.
that's what we have to continue to do. And like you're saying, like, don't shut them out. Don't be like, hey, you're Christian, I can't be your friend. You're Muslim, I can't be your friend. You're Hindu, I can't be your friend. No, like, it's like
Yeah.
we have to all to have these conversations, and the more we have them in a way that's not um, trying to make it into a fight, the
Yeah.
better. And I know,
Yeah.
Richard, you told me that you watched the epistemology video that Joe and I did with his cousin, like when at the beginning of my
Your
channel,
very
probably
first
like
video,
9 months ago. So like very bad audio. I'm glad that you were able to hear anything. Like, what would you tell like people that are listening that want to learn about that type of method? I know you're like really good at that.
I,
How do
I,
you have a good conversation with someone?
I think the thing is just to come on along, and I'm very lucky in that I have a lot of honest conversations with people, uh, and you know that's not all down to me. That's not down to me being a nice person and like friendly and welcoming and open to these people. Because if people bring bullshit to the table, I'll tell them. Fucking Atangelo once called the perspective when I was hosting, and I literally laid out before the call even started. I said, "Look, brother, I'm not a street. Don't take me as some British shrinking violet. You're gonna get told from the fucking beginning of this call, no bullshit." And I'll take people down when I need to take them down. I think
Jackie.
the
Jackie.
the thing is, Jack is. I think Jack is kind of one of those cases where we get. I genuinely have had people stop watching Talk Heathen because we take Jackie's calls, but he's one of those cases where it's. I think it's important to take people like Jackie because of the audience who are listening, because a lot of people realize that their thinking is bad, not through listening to the good arguments that I'm throwing out or Secular Rarity are throwing out or anyone else who's hosting these shows. A lot of people come to better thinking because they're listening to their fellow religious person talk
um,
shit. And
Jackie's
that's what's
very young. I don't know if you guys know how old he is. That he's 16 years old. Were you guys aware of that?
Wait, how old?
He's 16. He's 16
Really?
years old. Yeah.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, I
yeah.
didn't know that. I
He
wouldn't.
wants to pull his head
So
out of his arse and start.
yeah, that kind of changed my sort of idea. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I think the thing is regarding look, we're all capable of better thinking, and I think a lot of this, for me certainly anyway, I can only speak definitively from my own perspective. I've never been religious. I've never really held, apart from when I was really young, when everybody just kind of default believed in ghosts and aliens and shit like that. I've never really believed in any kind of supernatural aspect to anything, but I've still learnt a lot, and I've learnt a lot through examining, as we've talked about so much today, through
Mhm.
examining the mistakes that I make as a person, personally, about the biases that I hold as a person, and looking at those things and recognizing when they arise that I'm doing it. And I think I would encourage anybody to do that. And when I'm talking to religious people who want the conversation, and that's a very important kind of thing to throw out there. When I'm talking to somebody, and we have some great conversations with religious people who do want a conversation, I think they benefit from that as well. When you're exploring and you say, well, why is it that you believe what you believe? On the ACA TikTok, there was a period of about 2 months when I got a repeat guest on there who was a religious guy, was a Christian, and he had a degree in philosophy. And we had some great conversations in plain language, by the way, Jackie. Without having to use pretend
No script.
philosophical terms that you've just made up and you don't really understand, just in plain English, because we both know the subject matter. And we had some great explorations, and every single time we ended those conversations, he said to me, "Thank you. I've learnt something a little bit new about why it is that I think the way I do." And that is where the value comes from, just taking people on their own merit, having a conversation and having a genuine exploration with them. That's where you're going to get people to, it's just giving people a better toolbox. It's just
Yeah.
giving people a better toolbox, and I
Agreed.
appreciate that. I'm okay at this, doing what I do on the internet world. I'm okay at playing the bass guitar. When I was young, I'm shit at it now because I'm old and I can't breathe. But when I was young, I was okay. I was a pro wrestler. I was okay at fighting and doing mat wrestling and stuff like that. I'm okay at all that sort of stuff. I'm shit at anything practical. I can't fix a car. I'm crap at plumbing. Anything that's important and really useful in life, I'm no good at. Trust me.
Yeah,
I'm
I know
shit
that
at it.
feeling.
So I really appreciate. I'm super appreciate when I look at people who can do that kind of stuff, and kind of and can do things and do stuff that I have no knowledge of whatsoever. And I always hold in the back of my mind when I'm talking to people that this might be the first time they've talked to somebody about epistemology or critical thinking. So I've got to be that plumber for them. I've got to be that person who's got that knowledge, but I'm not just going to start throwing wrenches at them and saying you're thick because you can't fix these pipes. You know, I want to say to them, here's this toolbox. Let's walk through how you use it.
Yeah.
And then you're not having that knowledge. You will, maybe you'll pick a little bit up from having this conversation with me. Then you can go off into the big wide world and do it on your own. And that's that's the way I come to it from.
Yeah. Agreed, man.
Yeah, I love it. When on that video that I mentioned, I was so bummed because a whole bunch of the conversation, the microphone got muted by accident, my laptop going off or something, and so I didn't record that part. And we were talking about Dahmer and like psychopaths and like people who do like horrible things and the problem of evil and all of that. And it was a really good conversation because he's a Christian and we're not, and it went on, and I would just ask questions and let him respond, and then ask another question, and it got to a point where where I sort of got him to see that we can both give somebody a fair punishment for doing a horrible thing, like, I don't know, murdering somebody in cold blood, and at the same time help rehabilitate that person so that they can come back into society as somebody that is not going to repeat offend and go back to jail and commit the same crimes, which is something that we're currently doing. We just like throw somebody in jail, punish them, throw them back out, expect them not to do the same thing, even though we did nothing to help fix the problem that was
the main cause of
original,
what caused them to do
right?
the crime. Yeah.
And his response was just like he was like mind blown by that concept, that he'd never thought of that before. And it was like, wow, like I just love that conversation, and I thought that that's like a really great method for helping people understand like their biases and like why they believe what they believe and come to better conclusions. And yeah, so I've really enjoyed this conversation, but I think that we all can agree on one thing, and it's that we all need food to survive. And I took out some stuff to make Vietnamese pho because it's raining and storming over here, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna eat some soup.
That sounds
Sounds
good.
great.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Yeah, so I think we can wrap this up. And are there any closing thoughts you guys may have for this very in-depth conversation we've had?
Well, I just want to say that I really enjoyed the conversation with both of you, and really appreciate y'all letting me be part of this and coming on the show and hanging out with us. I'm new to all this, and it's just been great hearing y'all's thoughts and insight on some of this stuff.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I really, really appreciate y'all. And anytime you want, I'm always here. So y'all know how to get a hold of me.
Yeah, as soon as the topic was reached to me, I was like, "Yeah, I'm doing that." There was no doubt.
Right.
I've had a
Okay.
great
Right,
time. I
I
think
knew he'd be here a long time and have a good time. And
Yeah.
as
correct.
soon as AJ said, "I'm going to ask SR on with you," I said, "You do realize that if me and SR come on the show together, and there's no definitive running time, this is going to go a long,
yeah,
long
you're talking
time."
about consciousness. Yeah, man.
Yeah, like transient anuses and
That's right.
like fluffy hair. It
That's
was
the best
great.
thing. Yeah. And the fact that I have a raccoon tail. That and transient anuses. Yeah.
You may or may not. We
Yeah.
don't know
We don't know.
yet.
We don't know.
We're probably not gonna solve that one today on
Yeah.
this episode.
Yeah.
So, so I think everybody knows where to find you secular rarity, which I would say is pretty much everywhere.
Yeah. I'll be on Atheist Experience tomorrow. So come hang out and we'll take calls and yell at people or whatever, the normal. So
That's cool. Yeah, I'm doing the modding for the YouTube AXP, and then I'll probably be on the after show as well,
nice.
hanging out.
Nice.
Yeah. And Richard, we mentioned at the beginning, your channel is called Skeptic Takeout.
Yeah,
Which
yeah. And
Richard Gilliver? Wait, is
I
it okay? Kelly, Laughlin, and
I
I
get this
were
all the time. It's Gilliver, but honestly, I don't
Gilliver,
give a shit
Chill,
what people call
Chilliver.
me.
Okay, Chilliver.
But
Gotcha.
Skeptic Takeout is I do most stuff on TikTok on there. I try and duplicate stuff onto YouTube if I can. But I will also be on. I'll be on Talk Heathen. Talking about the ACA tomorrow before SR's on the Atheist Experience.
Oh, so both of
You
you are
can
on tomorrow. Nice.
have a double whammy of us.
They separate us now. They
don't
had
let
too
us go on
much.
together.
They had too much. They had like 2 episodes, and they were like, "Jesus fucking Christ, not that
Yeah.
again."
It
They
was
were
funny
like,
because
yes,
the last
Brennan.
time I was on the Atheist Experience, I was just a backup host, so they brought me on for like 30 seconds or whatever they do, just to, and I fucking totally roasted SR on it. It was great. Someone had called in the previous week. They had played the voice message, and someone had said, it's okay, but SR talks far too much. And then they brought me on, and they were talking about various things. And I can't remember who you were hosting with. Oh, it was Armin. And Armin said to me, "And what do you think about that voice message, Richard?" And I was like, "I'm in total fucking agreement with the caller. He talks far, far too much. No one can ever get a word in edgeways." And they were like, "Fuck off now, then."
I was like, get him out of here! Get him out of here!
I mean, you have the record lengthy Discord record,
is
right?
true.
For the longest. So yeah, I
That
mean,
is
like
true.
everybody
is true.
knows that when you're gonna be on their show, there's like no
Yeah.
ending. It's open ended. So
Yeah, that was
yeah.
like 8 or 9 hours, some nonsense. And honestly, it wasn't until about hour 6 that I was like, all right, like I need to like stand up or something, But yeah, no, we
Deep vein thrombosis setting in.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, not positive that I can feel all my toes. We're gonna do a 12. We're gonna do a 12 at some point, probably. I feel like we gotta do that. Get a good topic or something. Or just watch me sleep. I don't know. We'll figure it out.
We'll do both. Why
Yeah,
not?
yeah,
Right?
sure.
All right, guys. It was awesome having you. And I think for our show, we may do a random live again before the end of the year, but it's gonna be kind of busy with the holidays, and I have my eye surgery. I just got my stitches taken out on Monday, and it still hurts. But then I have another surgery in like 2 weeks after that, and then by the next year, my vision should be great again.
Yay.
Make my vision great again. There we go. That's a better slogan, right?
Yeah, no magic, no Jesus involved.
There we go.
Yeah, I don't know where he's been. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think he's probably just busy.
I should have just been rubbing mud in your eye this whole time.
Heck yeah. All right. So until next time, guys, don't forget to like the stream, subscribe to everybody's channels that is over here, and we'll see you soon.